Sorry. Is that good? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Brooke Wilson, she, her pronouns. I have 9 inches shorter hair than I did on Monday. Brownish blonde, sunglasses always on my head, wearing a black shirt, red pants, and flip-flops. I am the executive director of the Oregon Silk.
I'm Mel Leviton, she, her pronouns. I'm from Idaho, with the Idaho Silk. I'm a paraplegic, manual wheelchair. I have really cool Adidas kicks.
Yes, you do. Indeed. Wow. I'm Shelley Richardson. I'm the director of the Illinois Statewide Independent Living Council. Pronouns are she, her. I'm wearing a brown and different vari-color shirt. I'm short, little past middle age now, redheaded female, heavyweight with purple rim glasses.
Hi, all. I'm Tyler Wilcox. I'm the, executive director of ILCW, which is the Wisconsin Silk. I am 42, I think. I don't remember how old I am. I wear glasses. I have a big old beard, and I'm wearing a dusky blue t-shirt, I guess. Dusty blue? Yeah. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Edward Mitchell. I'm the executive director for the Tennessee Silk. I'm African-American male in a power wheelchair and glad for everybody to be here.
All right. We want this to be more interactive with the audience, but we love acronyms, in case you didn't know. So we put the alphabet soup on the first slide. I'll just go ahead and read it to everyone. So it says SIL, Center for Independent Living, ILC, Independent Living Center, SILC, Statewide Independent Living Council, DSE, Designated State Entity, ACL, Administration on Community Living, OILP, Office of Independent Living Programs, IL, Independent Living, SPIL, State Plan for Independent Living. Part B, they're the federal funds provided to the IL program through the DSC. Part C, federal funds provided directly to SILs, ILS, Independent Living Specialist. And if we missed one and we use one, please interrupt us and ask. Next slide.
Yeah, no, I got it. So we're kind of be interested in knowing who's here today. So who is a SIL director? Quite a few. Cool. SIL staff? Awesome. Like 50-50. DSE? Any DSE here? Awesome. Thank you for coming. That's amazing. That's what I like to see. Council or board members? Right on. Anyone that I missed? No. Silk staff? I didn't write the slideshow, Brooke.
Silk staff.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you did.
1 second. Sorry.
And I'm and I do work and I'm about to do work as a peer support specialist, and I'm on a local accessibility committee and a system change group, in addition to being being a disability support for a lot of different places and a Silk board member. So that's my other part of being here.
Thank you. We all wear many hats. It does say silk staff. So if he didn't say silk staff, how many silk staff do we have? All right.
Okay, here's a question. How many of you have been in your position for 3 or less years? Oh, you poor newbies. That's the reason we did the acronym soup thing.
All right, next slide.
All
Okay.
right, so I could do most of it if you want. Yeah, no, I don't mind. So this is something that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. and That is who develops the spill. Does everyone know what the spill is? That wasn't in the action. Was it in the soup?
Uh-huh.
My brain is mush today. I'm sorry, y'all. Um, so the SILs and the SILC, the state plan must be jointly developed by the chairperson of the SILC and the directors of the SILs after receiving public input from individuals with disabilities and other stakeholders throughout the state. I like to kind of explain these things. They're not always, when it's legal stuff, it isn't super clear all the time. Basically, everyone writes the SILC or the spill, right? Yeah, it's the responsibility of the SILC and it's the responsibility of the SIL directors to kind of collaborate and it's kind of, but at the end of the day, everyone in the state kind of writes it, or they should do, right? The primary duty of the SILC is jointly developing the state plan for independent living, SPIL or state plan, with the SILs in the state. So the SILC should be inviting people to sit at the table. The SPIL serves as a blueprint that encompasses the activities planned by the state to achieve its specified independent living objectives. It's important that word blueprint, I like to say roadmap, or because it isn't prescriptive, right? It just says, here's point A, here's point B, kind of here's how we want to get there. But y'all need to also be responsible if you work at a SIL, how kind of making the details kind of fit in. The SPIL must reflect the needs of individuals with significant disabilities in the state. Right, and the only way to do that, the only way to make sure that it is reflecting needs that persons with disabilities have is that they're helping to write it, right? It doesn't do us any good to say, this is what people need and just kind of put our own stuff on there. These are the main sections of the spill. And I'm going through this real fast, so please stop if you have questions. And my compatriots up here can smack me around if they need to. What got real excited by that too. Ugh. Okay, so some of the main sections are the mission for the IL network, including the SILC, SILs, and DSE. So what are we all actually working toward?
Can I interrupt? I brought.
Out of my,
I brought our spill that has our mission. And I want to read this to you as we updated it this year to more reflect what we were trying to do. For all you in the crowd from your Centers for Independent Living, have you read your new spill yet? You have? Okay. Okay, that's good. I heard a laugh from Teresa. So okay, so our mission as we see in Illinois where persons with disabilities are independent, in control of their lives, and free from barriers to full participation in society. Silk of Illinois' mission is to provide the leadership, research, planning, and education required to support independent living services in Illinois. Now, this rest of this is what we added. We define independence as living with any necessary resources that allow Illinoisans with disabilities to live independently within our community and maintain full control of their own decisions. And we value diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we strive to incorporate these values into every goal, objective, and activity throughout this plan.
I think there'll be a slide here in a minute where we're going to talk more about missions and goals. So I'm
Yeah.
going to hold off.
Oh, thank you. That was cool. And it's good to know what other people are saying and doing. What I like is that at the end of the day, our mission statements probably should be pretty similar, I think. I think if they're too far different, then maybe we're missing something. Either everyone else is missing something or we are missing something. Does that make sense? Yeah. There should also be the state's goals and objectives, including how they will be measured. So how are we going to get there? You know, this mission is a great thing, but what steps are we going to take to be able to say mission accomplished? A detailed description of how the state's Part B funds will be spent. This is the one that people probably argue about the most, I would think. An account of the outreach efforts to identify underserved and unserved and underserved populations, you know? How are we gonna reach people that we haven't been reaching? How are we gonna reach those communities that maybe have been kind of not as present as they maybe should be? A detailed report of the services currently provided in the state. What are we already doing? And who's doing those things and how are they being done, kind of. A description of the state's existing network of SILs, including Part C and Part B SILs. So who are we talking about? Who does this plan apply to? Who gets to sign this bill at the end? And there's more. This bill is huge. If y'all haven't, I mean, you've read it, so y'all know. A plan for how the network will develop statewide in the future. So what are we doing going forward? How are things going to change? Are they getting bigger? Are we going to focus on things? What are we doing? A detailed plan for how any new IL funds will be used, including one-time funds. And this gets really important too, because all of a sudden there's money and we don't know what we're doing with it. And it kind of vanishes when we don't, right? It just kind of disappears because we don't know what we're doing with it. And when it's gone, it's not there anymore. A detailed plan for how the network will adjust to funding reductions or closing of a SIL. It happens sometimes. Funding reductions, we see that a lot. Closing SILs, that happens too sometimes for a lot of different reasons. And we need to be ready for it. You know, if it comes as a surprise, we've got a problem. A narrative on the working relationships of providers in the state's IL network. So how does everyone do what they're supposed to do? And how is it supposed to work? The SILCs resource plan. So how are we as a SILC going to be using the funds that we've been given? What are we going to do? This is kind of background on like how the SPIL development process works. So it has to be submitted by June 30th of the year that it will be implemented. That's about 3 months before the end of the fiscal year. And that's so that the folks that we submit it to have a chance to kind of look it over and say, yeah, this is good. You're good to go. The SPIL period is 3 years. It begins October 1st. So we just started our new cycle just now, the 24 through 27 cycle, and it'll end September 30th, 3 years later. So in 27, September 30th, the SPIL that we're on right this moment will be no more. You have to have several people sign it. The chairperson of the SILC on behalf and is authorized by the SILC. So not only does the chairperson have to sign it, but the SILC has to say, yeah, we grant them the authority to. Not less than 51% of the state IL directors are required as well. So that means there has to be buy-in. Not only are we meant to develop it with the SILs, but to ensure that we kind of have that buy-in, they're meant to sign it as well. The director of the DSE indicating agreement to fulfill the responsibilities of the DSE detailed in the law. And this is one where it gets a little bit funky because really all the DSE is signing is to say, there's these things called assurances and we're going to follow those. They don't really get to say you're not doing the SPIL the way we want to. They just get to say, yeah, we're going to do the part that we're supposed to do. Jenny?
Can you clarify that the DSE is not part of the stakeholder groups that are developing the SPIL? Is that correct?
That's not necessarily correct. They don't have to be. It's kind of complicated. They can absolutely be part of the stakeholder groups, and they should be. I think they should be, but it's not necessarily a requirement. Does that make sense?
I think I do because we have such a good relationship with the DSE. We've never had any kind of problems. We're one of the fortunate states, but I always want them on board so that they're buying into what we're doing.
In the planning and the development of the SPIL, they're involved.
Yes.
Got it.
So this is Brooke, and about 10 years ago, there was a change. It used to be that the SILC and the DSE developed the state plans, and the centers should be included, but it wasn't mandatory. But then when the act changed. It was that the SILC and the centers developed the state plan. So I think you're going to see variations across the country based on relationships, because really at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to, as to who is involved in the development. But there's no steadfast rule that, yes, the DSE has to be there.
I was just going to reinforce what you said, so thank you.
I was going to say, some states too have included the B centers only funding versus C centers for the spill. So there's different parts there too.
Yeah, this is Tyler. Yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity, and in some ways it's good, but sometimes it causes a little bit of confusion, you know? The other last part is the ACL administrator may withhold, reduce, limit, or terminate funding if a state does not submit an approvable spill. The funding that can be affected includes the Part C direct grants to the SILs in your state, as well as those funded by Part B that flows through your state. So basically, like, write your spill, you know, make sure.
So this is Mel from Idaho again. So I think a lot of people don't understand that if you don't have a spill that's been approved, so it's got to be submitted timely, right? And it's got to be approved, that all the IL money in your state can be cut off, not just B, but C as well. And we bumped up against that in Idaho this year, not because anybody disagreed or wasn't getting along. So we used to have, when I started 10 years ago, we had a horrible relationship with a DSE. We now have a fine relationship with a DSE. And really none of the people changed. So we all just stuck at it. And things were going along good. We were planning on submitting way early. And suddenly the DSE was in some financial problems. And the administrator wasn't sure she could sign it because she wasn't sure if she had the money to sign it. And so just a few weeks before it had to be submitted, she couldn't sign it. And everything kind of blew up in everybody's face, and we weren't sure what we were going to do. And they were trying to work through plans with us, and we're all trying to work through plans. We had no support from the governor's office. We were essentially on our own. They really threw her to the wolves. And like, it was in the papers that all this money was, the state was going to lose all this money. And long story short, the DSE managed to pull it out. RSA was actually really helpful, which was unusual in my experience anyway. RSA is Rehabilitation Services Administration. They administer funds to the DSE in our state. And we were able to get it submitted. We were able to get it signed, and we did it really quick because the administrator was going to change over, and we were very concerned that the new administrator wouldn't sign this bill that we'd put all this work into. So these pieces and how they're laid out in your current spill and those relationships, like, they really, really matter, and getting everybody on the same side and believing that everybody's on the same side. We all want what's going to help people with disabilities in our state. And really going at it from that kind of direction, I think, made something that could have been pretty catastrophic. Even though it's very unlikely ACL would have withheld the money. Like, they were working with us to try to figure it out. We were working with them. But keeping everybody moving forward in really hard times was critical, I think, to making sure that that happened. And everybody really worked hard at that to make it happen. So what's in the spill really, really matters. And then following through with it really, really matters.
So this is Brooke, and I just want to say, you have to have all of those signatures before you can click the submit button. So you can't just send it and go, we're still working on the signature, you know, so-and-so's on vacation, they'll be back 3 weeks from now. We just want to get this done on time. You have to have all of those signatures before you can submit.
So this feels kind of like going backwards a little bit, but you all know what the spill actually
My
is.
fault. Sorry,
What?
it's my fault.
No, that's okay. This is actually a good question because we've been talking about a lot of this stuff. Do we know what the spill actually is? Like, and I'm seeing a lot of blank faces, right? It is our way of saying, here's what we're doing. Here's how we're making people's lives more independent. These are the things that we as a state have identified as the things that we need to do. That was troubling. It's raccoons or something, right? It's a lot of really, really. So what is the spill? Like it says, missions, the big picture. What is the whole thing? What are we all about? What are we going to do? The overall outcome for the IL network within your state goals. Little medium bits, right? These are the ideas or the plans. So these are the things that lead up back into the mission.
Okay, do you mind if we do something? If we could go from here to the end here and just say what the goal, you don't have to read the whole goal, just what the overarching idea of the goal was. Is it employment, housing? You know, what are the goals of your spill?
This is Edward from Tennessee. One of our goals is to educate Tennesseans about emergency preparedness. And with that, the SILs and the SILC will spend times developing relationships with FEMA, TEMA, and other emergency management agencies to make sure that Tennesseans are getting the services they need, but also if there's other disaster preparedness, that they are ready. So we spend time with developing those hours and relationships with EMA, and that's one of our goals.
How many goals you have?
We have 3 goals in our spill. Our other 2 are, one, making sure that individuals with disabilities are getting the assistive technology they need. And then also, one, making sure that we're establishing best practices with our SILs. Sometimes our states have been kind of fractured. There's been turnover. So making sure that we're having quarterly meetings with just our frontline staff, but then also the directors to establish best practices, but also to make sure that new frontline staff are familiar with the SILC and also the other centers, and that we're all in this together.
You're just big goal ideas.
All right, so this is Tyler. So one goal is centered around our SILs being equitable, or I'm sorry, providing high quality services. Essentially is us saying, are we reaching enough people and are they being reached in a way that we feel is providing them with the help that they need? Second is actually about funding, and that is making sure that everyone in the state, all of our SILs are getting equitable funding, not equal, equitable. So we're developing a new formula. We're going to roll that out. Maybe like there's a lot of ins and outs about how that's going to work, but it's making sure that everyone has the money that they need to do the work that they need to do. 3 is about advocacy, and it's about bringing more voices into our advocacy efforts. And that is both voices from within the network and without the network. So not only including more of our IL staff, but also reaching more communities that we haven't in the past, historically excluded communities that don't have much of a voice within IL to begin with, and especially within our state. And then the 4th centers around making sure that everyone's well informed, because none of this stuff works if we don't actually know what we're talking about at the end of the day.
Okay, understand that under each big title that I'm going to give you are different objectives that we would do. But our first goal is to build up our network capacity within our SIL network throughout the state. The second one is to work on objectives of emergency preparedness. The third goal is to work on employment opportunities for people with disabilities. The 5th one is I'm doing this without everything in front of me. My fifth one is to work on housing, providing more housing for people with disabilities throughout the state. And then our sixth one is improving transportation opportunities for not only just people with disabilities, we also have put in all of these for disadvantaged populations all across the state of Illinois. Because if you help one of us, you help everyone. So, what about you?
Microphones everywhere. This is Mel. So our goals, our goal one is the Idaho IL network will promote and advocate for the integration, inclusion, and equity of Idahoans with disabilities across lifespan and cultures. Within that goal, we have activities around emergency preparedness, mitigation, and recovery. Goal two, the Idaho IL network will work to strengthen effective network collaboration, leadership, development, and resources. Within that goal are many of the youth activities and peer-to-peer support between the centers for independent living. Goal three, Idahoans with disabilities receive the community-based supports and services they need to live in the community with greater independence. So we really combine a lot of activities around goal one, which was promoting and advocating for integration, inclusion, So working toward home and community-based services, and then the two things overlap regarding housing and then the systems advocacy that's needed to ensure that people have the supports they need to live at home where they choose and also get housing.
So this is Brooke, and I'm not going to read the actual goals. I'm going to read from a presentation that puts them into more plain language. So gain funding and support to provide increased independent living services. Listen and respond to specific consumer needs. And educate about and advocate for the independent living philosophy.
So later on, when we talk more about this, if you guys have a totally different goal, different than what we worked on, I'd really like to hear what you guys' different goals are.
So how is it important? Like, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of why we're here right now. This bill ensures consumer control of statewide funding and policy. People with disabilities are making the decision about funding, program focus, outreach plans, expansion of the network. Persons with disabilities run the SILs and the SILC, and the SILs and the SILC are the SPIL decision makers and authors, and the DSE must follow what's in this bill. So that's a lot of saying it's important because it is written by folks with disabilities. The SILC typically and should be comprised of people who don't work at the SILs, right? It's mostly people who are not associated with the IL movement in that way. They're outside. They are consumers and should be more than they are SIL staff or SIL directors. There are folks who are saying, hey, look, I have a disability. This is my experience, and this is where I think things need to go. It is the nothing about us without us. That is what the SPIL is making sure that that's a reality. Who uses it? The SPIL sets out the focus of the IL for the state. Each SIL is responsive to its community needs and adjusts its program accordingly. The SPIL is an opportunity to look at the big picture trends and needs of people with disabilities statewide. So the idea is that, like I said, it's a roadmap or a blueprint. Here are the things that we need. Here are the things when we hop in a helicopter and look down at the state, this is what we're seeing. The SILs can look at it a lot more granularly. They can say, yeah, housing, that's great. And here's how it works in our area. And here's how we're going to focus on that. Or yeah, transportation is great. I'm in a big city, so I'm going to work on busing. And I'm out in a rural community, so I'm going to work on volunteer driver programs, right? Those are both really important. busing is probably not going to work as well when you've got swaths of farmland between two houses. And a volunteer driver probably not going to work great in a big city where people don't have cars because they don't need them for the most part. And that's why this bill is not prescriptive about that stuff, because if it were, people would get left behind, and we're trying to include everyone. So one of the important questions that we need to think about is, how is this bill integrated into the work plans of your SILs? Is it even integrated? Are those goals, is that mission? Are those goals and objectives? Are you working on that at your individual centers? And how are you working on it?
Can we like elaborate on that? So
that's
I
why I
think
went
about,
back.
this is Brooke again. I think about half the room raised their hand that they were from a center. So that was the question, like, how is this bill integrated into the work plan, or is it? So for the first raise of hands, is this bill integrated into your work plan? Okay, I got some nods, I got some hands. Okay, if it's not, let's see those folks. Okay, and what was that? Do you want to talk? Hold on.
Well, since our centers are not allowed to participate in the development of this bill, our centers have not integrated this bill. We don't find any goals or objectives in our state plan that address any needs of the public, because the public wasn't involved in developing it, and neither were we. So we don't incorporate.
And while I walk, this is Brooke again. When I first started with one of the states, the centers were involved and it was all about the directors, but where were the consumers? So I saw you, Kimberly. I'm going to go to Curtis first.
Curtis Raines from Oregon, a center director. So it's disturbing to me many times that when we start working on the spill, that centers aren't involved in it. I know some states really have a problem between centers and their SILC. And I think it is so sad, because the thing is everything we do comes from the spill, whether we like it or not, that we need to be united. It's not about them, us, anything. It's about doing this together. Because if you just read what we've went through, we at the center are we're putting our stuff into this spill as well, because that's what we're going to end up working on. So if you're not part of that, how do you think we're going to work on this in the state? And it's getting the input from all these people with disabilities, listening sessions, however you want to gather that information. And I don't see how we cannot work together to make that spill. And I think it's really sad when we're not able to do that.
My name is Kimberly and I'm from Seattle. And I think we actually had a long conversation about this specific thing this year when we wrote our spill, because we had a couple SILs who were talking about the fact that, our work plan is our work plan. You can't tell us what we have to do. However, one of the things that we really had the conversation in depth about was that you still can do the things that you want to do for your SIL, but then you can take a look at the spill and see what your center goals and how they relate to the actual statewide goals are. And it's actually part of our PPR. We have to relate our work plan to the spill goals directly. And so it's something that, I've actually got my staff taking a look at in terms of how do our activities relate specifically to the goals. And it's actually how, Washington State's kind of a little backwards on how we have to do things, but we have to contract for our Part B money. And so we have to do monthly reporting. And our monthly reporting form used to be like this massive, huge thing where we had to like count all these numbers and all that kind of stuff. And we said, well, this is ridiculous. We're not going to do this anymore. The primary purpose of it is to relate that the activities that we do at our center relate directly with spill goals. And so now we just write a narrative about what we do, kind of like the response to the work plan and the PPR, and outline which goals or indicate which goals in the spill that activity relates to. So then that way we have something directly to measure.
PPR's program performance report, I don't think it was in alphabet soup.
Yeah, I would like to, wondering if we could talk a little bit about implementation and evaluation and monitoring of the spill, because that's kind of where we are now. I will say that SILCs are, our meetings are supposed to be public. They are public meetings. So if a center felt like they had no say in the implementation or in the development, that should be an opportunity for them to speak. But be that as it may, I'd love to hear about implementation.
I see your hand. I'm going to Sarah because her hand was up first. Sorry.
Hi, this is Sarah. I'm from the Florida Silk. Going along with what, oh gosh, remind me of your name over with this time. Kimberly. So very similar to Kimberly's SIL in Florida, we have our DSC that also contracts state funds to our SILs. And so the Florida Silk has quarterly survey questions that they have to fill out in order to go along with each goal in the state plan. So a lot of it is just numbers, but there also is a narrative portion, and that's also how we're tracking implementation and evaluation. And so we have a SPIL committee that meets through our SILC. They meet once a month. A lot of the SILs, all the SILs are invited to join that, as well as our board members, and they review all of the surveys and the questions and the results through that.
Okay, this is Edward with Tennessee Silk. As far as implementation and making sure that all voices are heard, in our state, at our quarterly meetings, we make sure that we budget in to make sure that every director can come and they're a part of the meetings, but then also they give their quarterly reports, to the council members on what they've been doing. And as we implement the spill, not only do we do that, we have it inputted into our database system as well as a productive spreadsheet to where I get those quarterly reports from them, and then I aggregate it onto the DSE, filling in my information as well. So then again, those results are read again also at the quarterly meeting. So then everybody from all the council members and those in public see how it's being implemented, as well as the SIL directors feel like they have a voice and making sure that they feel a part of the SILC. So that creates that statewide collaboration.
So my name is Brianna from Indiana. And I guess my question is almost more so asking for advice, since everyone at the table comes from different states with different silks. We, what would you suggest when your silk is actively discouraging public input by having their meetings be listed as public, but Zoom links change, or they're not held in public places, only online, or they will have a listening tour that only tours one city in Indianapolis, or they will mute your microphone, or they will not even advertise when a meeting has been changed or canceled. Do you have any advice that would be to deal with something like that?
This is Tyler. No, I don't. It sounds really frustrating. And what I can say is that it sounds like it might be a thing where you need to talk to ACL, or you might need some mediation. I thankfully in my state don't have that issue. I have very good relationships with all of my centers. They are active parts of our meetings, and I think that's true of this. And it's got to be frustrating as hell. And I'm sure it feels lonely. And I am sorry that I don't have a better answer for you, but I do think probably the best answer is reach out to someone at ACL or someone like that, and be willing to also have a session, like a mediation, I think might be a good way to go about it. Have someone third party not involved.
Can I piggyback on the go to ACL? Go to ACL. Document what's happening, document when it's happening, document to who. And if you haven't, if you have, you've done that and haven't gotten any traction, I'm so sorry.
That's terrible.
And this is Brooke, and I was gonna say, I've actually heard of Indiana's struggles for several years, but we have to follow the public meeting laws that are outlined within our state. So maybe you could get some support in the state as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to brag. What I think helps in the state of Illinois, I understand we have 22 centers. And they're involved from the very beginning on developing this bill. I mean, we have a big brainstorming session and we serve food, not alcohol, but food. And so the directors are there and some of the SIL staff members, all the council members, we're all brainstorming. And that's after we have been all over the state at different places in person taking comment. And John will tell you, Illinois, we're from Chicago all the way down to Metropolis. We were there during this bill taking public comments. And we also took public comments also online. We sent out surveys, we did Survey Monkeys, but we did live Zoom sessions too. But I think what helps us to communicate is that, John, we have a network association of our Centers for Independent Living, and John is the head of that. And we communicate constantly back and forth. And so I am at the directors meeting every month, giving an update on what's going on at SILC. And then in turn, they have an appointee that is at our quarterly meetings all the time to report what's going on with the centers. And we're in constant communication with each other. And it's really made a difference in our state. I'm real proud of our state. John, wave if you're proud of our state. Thank you.
This is Mel again. I can't speak to the challenges that y'all are having in Indiana, but I do know. So my second spill was incredibly challenging because of the way funding was set up. I think it was my second, maybe it was my first. I've done 5 of them in 10 years. So there's just too many. I think it was my first or second. Anyway. All submitted, yes, all submitted differently. Anyway, it was one of the first 2. Funding reallocations had to happen in a big way, like so the SILC at that time, when I came on, the SILC got 39% of the Part B money. One of the centers got 15% of the Part B money. The center that was the best funded and served the smallest area got the most money of Part C money. They're the only ones that got B money. And then the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired got 45%. And WIOA came in and said, guess what? Y'all can't do. And we had 2 DSEs, the Commission for the Blind and Vocational Rehabilitation. It was a nightmare. Getting funding reallocated away from the Commission for the Blind was really hard. The Federation for the Blind of Idaho had a much stronger lobbying arm and apparatus than we could ever hope to have. Where Idaho is pretty disorganized. To say it was challenging is not even close to how bad it was. ILF, like we brought ACL in, they really just made it worse. I left meetings sobbing in the snow, and I'm not really a crier. And it was horrible. I didn't think it would ever end. I didn't think it would ever get good. The only thing that fixed it is that, and the Commission for the Blind and they like came to all of our public meetings. Nobody else could talk. It was like a really bad year, I'm telling you. And then when the funding reallocations of the funding was reallocated, they weren't happy about it. And the only thing that got them to back off, and I'm speaking about the Federation of the Blind in Idaho. The only thing that got them to back off was I had to go through historically through the law and how the law had been applied and how the law changed, and essentially write a brief. And I'm not a lawyer, but I used to work for the P&A, so I knew how to. It was like this combination brief and white paper of the history of the funding for IL and for the blind community, and lay it all out. And it was way too long, but I took every single argument by argument by argument. And we were right. So that helped a lot, right? We were right. And laying all that out very methodically got them to back off. They were like, oops. Because I pointed at every single law and every single juncture in that history. Now, I'm not saying that's going to work everywhere, because I know everywhere is different, but doing it in that methodical way where everybody could see what it was, and it made it very, very public, that they had no choice but to back off. So just a thought.
So, thank you. Just to sum up, imagine, if you will, you have a 10-member SILC, and 7 of the 10 members are center directors, and the SILC changes the budget to increase the budget for 6 centers and reduce it for 1. So that's our world. Don't want to go into it anymore. You got other stuff to talk about, but that's our world. Thanks.
So I would just point out your silk would not be in compliance.
Yes. We're going to skip this one because we talked about it. So ILSs make a difference. Sorry, when I see ILS, I'm thinking IL services. So I'm like, no, we did the alphabet soup. It's independent living specialists. In order for SPILs to be successful in reaching the goals and objectives outlined, there's a direct connection to SIL staff. And this is the thing that gets missed a lot. Right, because you hear about a lot of leadership talking about the SIL and the SPIL and all that, and it doesn't really make sense if you're working one-on-one with consumers. Independent living specialists are the direct connection to the consumers. They build those relationships and develop trust with both consumers and other community partners. Serving your communities, IL skills, providing peer support, advocacy, and so many other everyday activities result in the success for the SPIL and your IL network. Consumers receiving services in their local SIL is one measure of the impact of SILs within their communities. Success stories, like we are always asking for those stories. This is why. We're supposed to be consumer driven and consumer controlled, right? Again, that nothing about us without us. We're all SILC directors. We exist at a very, very high level looking at all of this stuff. And it's important, but we need also folks who are connected, because we don't know what's happening. Like I said, we're in a helicopter. We need people down on the ground. We need to know what's going on there. All of those services that IL specialists are providing are a direct result of what happens in the SPIL. And that SPIL is never successful unless you kind of know what's going on. And what I like to tell people is, look, the funding is obnoxious. I hate reading about the funding. It's boring. It doesn't make sense. The network of centers is really technical and it gets really silly. But you know what? Those goals and objectives, usually pretty approachable. And when I was an IL coordinator or IL specialist, those goals and objectives directly impacted what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's the connection that I think that we forget about and that I think we lose, right? SPIL doesn't exist without that. And in some ways might be the most important part of this bill, because everything else trickles out of what are we trying to accomplish? And we don't accomplish those things without you all.
I will say that being so connected to the network and us writing our spill together makes it so that I can talk to any ILS on any given day and they can tell me something that they did and I can tell you exactly where it relates to in the spill. Exactly. Everything they do. And so I would suggest for any new SILC staff or SILC directors that you start taking a tour of your state and you go to every individual Center for Independent Living, introduce yourself and talk to the staff and let them know about the spill. Do you know that I served as an ILS for probably a good 5 years before I even knew there was a state plan for independent living? And so since I had worked 10 years as an ILS, the first thing I did when I came to the SIL was make sure that every center and every staff member knew what the state plan for independent living was, knew what SILC was, and why it was important.
And this is Brooke, and I'm just going to encourage the directors in the room of whatever you're directing to promote those relationships. So when the SILC comes to your center, whether it's a staff member or a council member, encourage those introductions and those relationships with the other staff, because oftentimes we are stuck in this vortex where it's just a bunch of directors and it never gets out of that vortex.
My name is Eric Riskus. I'm from the state of Wisconsin. I'm in program director at a Center for Independent Living as well as chair for the state SILC. Everybody here should have staff meetings taking place at some point, whether it's with your department, with your agency as a whole. But typically, those are fantastic opportunities to invite the SILC to come in and do presentations. I love presentations. I love giving presentations. I love it when people can present to my staff. So having everybody in one area, we actually had Tyler, who's the executive director for our state SILC, come to our center and give a presentation, not only about the spill, but really what is the SILC. Because much to your point, when I first started working at Midstate, for the first 2 years I worked there, I learned about the spill, but I didn't realize that the council was a thing, the roles that they had, starting to learn more about it. So now it's important to me to make sure that my staff, when they're working, they understand what are the goals that they're working towards, what is the spill, what is the SILC, and how all those pieces connect together. So invitations for presentations are crucial and helpful. Oh, there you are.
Hi, Tylee from Utah. So we just got back from something really cool in our state, which was we did a statewide independent living conference. And as a SILC, we pushed pretty hard to get this to happen because I started as an IL coordinator in 2014. And from the year 2019 until just now, we hadn't had an independent living conference, and we did that yearly previously. And that was a really great way to get buy-in and have the opportunity to talk about the IL network and everybody's role in that. And that sparked some good conversations with center directors, and we were invited to do a training recently at one of the centers. So if you have opportunity to do something like that in your state, that's a great way to make connections.
So in the Oregon spill, it's actually one of our objectives that at least once during the spill period, we will hold an IL conference. In 2024, we did a Region 10 conference. It was really fun.
All right. This is Edward from Tennessee. The independent living specialist, you are the frontline workers. You have the direct knowledge with your consumers. And it's important that you get to know your consumers and let them know when you do your 30-day, 60-day, 90-day check-ins, tell them about the SILC. Have them join one of the public meetings. Again, going to the website, because again, we need a feeder system of new council members. 3 years goes fast, and then life happens. People move, people take changes of jobs. So we have to have a pool of individuals to pull from. So definitely, please let your consumers know about the SILC and have them join the public meetings.
I've got two questions. One is how to, there are some parts of the spill that are fairly understandable for the general public, but some parts are really difficult to understand. They're very complex. And if we're truly going to get public input and we're sincere about that, we have to figure out a way to make it more accessible. I haven't figured that out yet, and I'd love to hear some input on that. Also, I'd love to know how you got your conferences costs covered, because I would love to do that in Texas. I'm the SILC director in Texas.
So this is Tyler. Making this bill accessible is a pain. My suggestion, it takes a lot of work to make stuff plain language, and that's where most of the accessibility comes into. There's something online called the Hemingway app. It's free. You can take chunks of text and post it in there, and it'll give you a readability score. Also, Microsoft has an accessibility editor that will give you a score also for readability. Between the two of those, I can usually get something that's like at a graduate level reading level down to a third or fourth grade reading level without it sounding like I'm talking down to people. But it takes a very long time, and you need to have the time to sit down and do it. Because I have taken just a paragraph and taken 8 hours to chop it down. But as you get better at doing it, it takes a lot less time. So it's really a question of learning how to do that and practice and the skills, and find someone who knows how to do it, because they can give you some guidance and provide you with a little bit of support too. And if you need to call me sometime, feel free. I'll give you my card. Say, hey, how do I turn this sentence, make it more readable? I'm not the best at it, but I've been doing it quite a bit, and I try to make everything that way. So one of my projects is going to be taking this bill and converting it into a plain text version so that it is readable. The other thing that I was going to say was that in addition to Edward's comment about having folks come to your meetings, I actually had IL specialists as part of my SPIL committee. So it wasn't just the SPIL directors, it was frontline staff that were sitting in those meetings with us, helping us develop. And I'll tell you what, it made a world of difference, because there were times where they would say, that doesn't make sense. That's not what our experience is on the ground. Like, it sounds really good, but that's not how things work. We've got 3 minutes and a lot of slides. All right, I'm going to move on to the next. Maybe skip this one. We've done this. Yeah, we heard from a lot of y'all. We've done this a little, huh? Yeah. Are we doing this? Yeah, we did this.
Brooke, you guys have been way more engaged, and we haven't had to like give prizes or anything, so.
Yeah, we kind of did this too. Like, we've talked about all these things, right? Invite staff, have them there, have everyone there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is important. I'm going to say one of the things that I do, I'm going to add to this. How does SIL staff get information? One of the things that I do, and you all are going to hate me for saying this, I do a biweekly newsletter that I send out to anyone who wants it in the state. It's just an update email, and it says when our meetings are, and it says what I've been working on. Now, it is specifically designed for my council members, but I let anyone else join in, because you know what? I've got no secrets. There's nothing that I'm working on that shouldn't be and isn't public knowledge. And it gets folks involved, because sometimes they'll see something and say, ooh, that sounds interesting. I want to be a part of that. How do I jump in? Right? It starts a conversation. You could probably do monthly or not at all. I got a question.
Tyler, this is Joe Urbis from Minnesota. How many alternative languages do you publish your SPIL in? And the notices for your public meetings?
Well, I'm going to be very honest with you. Right now, it's just in English. That is one of the things that I need to do better on. And thank you for pointing. It is something that I'm very well aware of. Unfortunately, yeah, I need to work on that. And thank you for asking, because that is a very fair point. And I think it's something that we're all not, well, I shouldn't say that. I think a lot of people are not super great about that, but you're right. I need to do that.
This is Mel from Idaho. We do ours in 2, plus we have a version in Braille, and then we're doing a version, but it takes a long time, in ASL.
I have a quick question, only because this is Kimberly from Washington. In Washington, we're trying to decide, right now where we're housed is illegal. Rehab Act and all that. But so we're trying to decide about what type of structure we want our silk to have. And I'm kind of curious, I know what Idaho's is and I know what Oregon's is, but I don't know what your three are. And I'm kind of interested to find out what structure you have, whether it's a 501c3 or a quasi-state agency or what.
This is Edward in Tennessee. We're a 501c3.
This is Tyler from Wisconsin. We're also a 501c3.
And Shelley from Illinois, 501c3.
We're a state entity.
We're a quasi-state entity. Oh, this is Brooke from Oregon. I'm sorry. This is Brooke again. We did go a minute over. Our contact information is up on the slide for all of you. This is also available under the presentation materials on the conference website or the app. I also have business cards. I would like to talk more to Texas about accessibility or making a plain language. In Utah, there's this really cool table flow chart, or there used to be. It had the mission at the top, it had the goals, and then it just had the objectives. When it comes down to it, that's the part that needs to be shared and you need to get the most public input. The funding, anytime money is involved, it's going to be contentious. There's going to be feelings, emotions, not fun conversations. The section about the existing network, that's going to be a lot of conversations amongst the existing network. And so it's facilitating those conversations. But when it is all said and done and it's a 60-page plus document, what you really want to focus on is the mission, goals, and objectives. So breaking that down is a little bit simpler.
And this is Edward from Tennessee. If you come up here, you can come scan or QR code my business card, and you'll actually have a copy of my spill to go along with it.
I'm not that fancy, but I have some paper ones.
You need help with your thing?
Yeah, break it down, go to that.
Right on.
Will you?
So it wasn't bad.
Are you the tech for this room or? I am a board member though, so you should all set up. Okay, and that one's the captioning one? That's up. To plug in your. Perfect.
Well, perfect. It's a good thing I'm proud of.
They do have a clicker, but I couldn't get it to work with mine. I don't know if you can get it to work with yours. We have a roll to side. All right. So there is a wireless mic. As,
Super simple.
there is a wired mic as well as a wireless mic. If you can, that's how the cart is hearing. So please make sure everyone's using mics. I don't know who's who's room monitoring or facilitating this room after me. But, my jacket right here, is that okay? You're seeing, I'm. I'm staying.
Test, test.
Yes.
Could you please put your stream text link in the chat?
Oh, sure.
Here. The. Oh.
Thank you.
See.
Try to write should be forward.
Are they gonna let it? I'm not sure
Jamie,
yet.
can
Yeah.
you give me a
No,
test?
We're golden. We are golden. Yep.
Move up there.
Officer.
One moment. I
Oh,
need
yeah.
to.
I'm super fast.
Like I said, if you need power, it's right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, I know. I'm definitely gonna end up needing.
No, you're.
Captioner, can you give me a test?
Give me one moment here. I just need to open a new file.
Sounds like a plan.
1 second.
Alright.
Who do you use for your captioning service? The part.
For this, we're using a local organization and that's not who we usually use.
Are they cost effective? Are they still about 180 an hour? Same, okay.
So
So we normally use sign boxes.
Oh, we're actually the next group. Oh, I'll take the credit.
They're
Preparing for disasters.
two sessions.
Different group is doing one tomorrow.
So like, you know, I find out I have it in my mind. Oh, they're the.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it could be
There was one.
plans on how.
This one and one tomorrow.
Unfortunately,
Yes.
That's what we, in our conference, we just stay together because of the expense of, the expense of to do breakouts. But I guess virtually it would be a little bit cost.
Yeah, all the
cost
fracking going on.
effective.
We're having a problem in northern Colorado. It's getting much worse now.
I think he's watching.
Oh.
With the-
Right, it's like, we're not built for this, guys. You need to stop.
Yeah, definitely hurricanes down there. Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Nice and easy. No, you're fine, man. You're a celebrity here.
Yeah, who,
Did you see the test there?
Who does your card services?
I'm gonna stand.
This is Tim. Yes, we are seeing the test on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Only two people.
Because we're. And that's easy to get these some interpreters too, if I do video remote.
Yeah. Just clicked itself. Well,
Cool, thank you.
I was just gonna have to sit here then. Okay.
Oh, is she on the right one?
Yeah.
Is she in this one?
Creating resources as response teams with full community. That's
Oh, it
us.
is? Okay.
That's us. We're good. We confirmed that we're seeing the screen. No, we're doing great.
Follow me around.
All right, I'm gonna go step outside and be right back.
And then I'll pull some more chairs up here. Can we pull up at least 3 more?
For their Bearport group.
Okay. That might be ASL interpreter? No?
That was last spring.
No, I don't think so.
They had a state and then they had a.
Yeah.
Group locally, I guess, for that. I'm here to.
We are help.
Do whatever you need, run the mic when people have questions, but well, if you're using the corded one, I'll have that one.
We're gonna be running around, so we'll also do mic running as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, 'cause I can't take that one anywhere.
Yeah, I know. She's gonna use that one for the majority of the presentation and then it's a moderated panel, so we'll run. with
Okay.
it. But thank you.
No, you're
If
welcome.
we run into it, I'll.
We have-
Hey, can I get you?
Yeah, if you need something, I'll be with you on that. I'm Hank.
Hank, thank you.
Yeah, you're.
I think we need one more chair. Hannah's chair's right there.
And he asked me about that, I said, that's why whoever made that decision about making them feel good.
That's fine, yep.
Can you tell you how many people?
Yeah, because then you and Kirk can sit over here and then I can come over here when they get moderated. Because then Tim could use that mic and then we could.
Same thing. Even if you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, see, yeah, so. I love all. I guess I'll be on the business making a difference.
Okay, wherever you like.
Yeah.
Hannah, we have enough chairs up here now, just in case.
Nice.
Yeah.
I see you.
Well, I hope we get as many
Someone-
people.
Me too. Yeah.
It was kind of like 101. Sorry, yeah. I wanted to go, I didn't want to say it was again. Yes.
It turned out to be pretty good. I was like, yeah, it's back to 101. That's connecting.
He is from. Geez, I don't want to.
Yeah, I know. And then, a lot of people actually, and then it was a lot of fun. Then it comes solutions. So I was like, okay, I'm better now.
I do agree that I drill into people that is. Us, our job to teach our
community
Yeah, but they need to
and leaders.
take care of them. They're responsible too.
Yes,
For a big part of it.
definitely.
I think it just reinforces what independent living philosophy is that, you know, we don't want you to be dependent on us or anybody. You need to be self-reliant. And this is a case that it might be like for death if you don't, you know.
Definitely.
I'm afraid to sit down again. I wake up this, if I stand up, it forces me to
In
be awake.
that presentation, I was like, oh God,
No,
I'm getting
no.
tired. Come on, Sadie.
When it was kind of warm in there, you know,
Yeah, and then,
So-
yeah, well, I got cold in there for some reason, but it might have been because I'm getting tired. Yeah,
so, you know, I had to go get my sport coat just because from on. Looking so good today, you know? Plus I was freezing earlier. Yeah. My room was that way last night. It like got really hot. And then it got really cold. It's weird.
where do you want to sit, Kurt?
I don't care. I don't know. I'll be able to get up all these. I'll be, yeah, but
I'm gonna be-
I just don't want to. Okay.
Oh.
Maybe
So
just
which-
right here. I'll
Okay.
right-
Oh, it didn't- No, I didn't do this, so should it assign to say cut it off? How should it be?
Just flip us the bird. Shut up already.
You could do better.
Can't tell it. Yeah.
They in the half action report after real events or exercises.
Right.
They say, what went well? One thing that you should remember, what didn't go well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, right, yeah.
You're not gonna change it all, but then what,
Promise or something?
oh, yes, you're gonna be committed. Oh, no, this is commitment.
Yeah.
Oh, where's the one that you normally put, it's this one, for remember, right? You put a ribbon around it.
Right. So
Uh,
when I played wheelchair rugby, you know, the rest of my teammates, lots of spinal coordinators, they were quads. And they always go, because they couldn't. Well, separate fingers, they'd always go, read between the lines.
I'm Evans. I think that maybe just when we've seen you, I was at the Access and Functional Needs Conference in Colorado Springs, but you guys were so busy and putting on a show there, so.
We hope to slow down. We're
Yeah.
putting more roles and responsibilities on others so that we could be able to be where we're not so busy.
Yeah, so you guys are all over the place.
Yeah, and so now we're gonna get more help because our team, or my boss saw how much help we need. And so he's like, we're gonna move this to that person and that to that person. I was like.
Just the fact that the language part of it comes too, you know, in that, yeah, I was gonna say you guys need more. Cause that covers,
Well, and we don't
Psychological
trust others to do it.
yeah,
Because it gets us nervous that somebody's gonna be excluded. And if they don't know how to monitor our communication, because we're monitoring help us virtually. With our
Right.
virtual one.
I thought it was 3:15 when we started.
3:30.
Oh, wow. On the agenda, it says 3:15.
Does it?
really?
But like the cart is set up for 3:30, so.
So my printout says 3:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
On
printout
there?
does.
Yeah, when I was given, it's all 3:15 to 5s today.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the ad?
No, he's part of the
You
planning.
already-
committee.
This is one that we got as a board for like making sure that we're signed up for room moderating, so like, it's funny that this one's wrong.
Oh, well, they want you to be there 15 minutes ahead of time to set it up. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Been there, done that. Yeah. I didn't realize you're up. Stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I've
It's up,
been
you know,
trying to
they-
get Peter to come up, he wants to come up and see Idaho Springs and.
Yeah.
Silver Plume and everything like that.
It's still your turn.
Yeah, I don't have any contacts. I was praying, or it's really in their creek. It's bugs me. They've never had anything to meet them, you know. And I'm not very, I don't like to cold call people. I'd rather hear them say, hey,
Yeah.
you know. Plus, you know, now I know where to stop at. I-70 backs up, man.
Totally, man, yeah. It's not about place because it's usually like right before it starts all.
Yeah.
Getting all congested.
Tell you right that way. We
Nice.
could go.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had a lot of folks with disabilities living next to me. If I go to that concert, you know, they sat, and you know, they're all together all 3 days. They even, you know, they have their, what's their shuttle.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
They're mini buses, but they all have lifts. You can have one.
My hands like I need gloves and.
Where's it at?
Kelly, right?
Really?
He, and they have paint controls on the van or the bus for him. I think that is the coolest thing ever.
No, no. We have about what, how many? 7, 8, 10, maybe.
That's the one thing.
Yeah,
Clear Creek is.
there'll be some
They got
stuff
one
up there.
that's called the roundabout.
Yeah.
And it goes in between Idaho Springs, almost all the way up to Loveland Pass, so almost all the way to Eisenhower.
Really?
That loop and everything, but it's inconsistent. Sometimes when it show up, I was relying on it to get here and I almost missed some stuff. because
Really?
It didn't show up at 7:45 in the morning.
Wow.
But yeah, that's one.
You got a backup plan there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's presenting. Because we need to present from a PowerPoint, not Google slides.
Yeah.
Let's call on some.
I know,
Yeah,
but
calling somebody.
Presenting from the PowerPoint, you know how.
I need to get tired of screaming at nine.
So I just need to make sure that I was presenting from the PowerPoint.
Oh, I think he's on Google Slides. He did
Well, you know,
confirm
I was
something.
always, I
No,
spent
this
a
is,
lot of time
this
at
is
the old,
PowerPoint,
you just
because
can't find
the Google Slides.
Oh, yeah.
doesn't do that.
I,
If this is the-
it
or the Google-
helped me a lot.
These
Bam.
are the,
Yeah,
no,
don't realize
yes, Google
it's
Slides does
rest
do
of
this.
the
You
thing
have
too.
to,
Oh.
instead of hitting
But I have
slideshow,
friends.
you hit present.
I've known
She has
some
a very specific that
teens,
you might be the wrong
I
one.
know now, you know, we're old guys, you know.
Yeah.
Met there.
Did you know? Aaron?
Gotcha. Yeah, no, this is from the slides, not the PowerPoint.
It's because that communication and that wonkiness there.
So where's the PowerPoint?
She was, yeah, first done it.
Let's see, it should be in this one.
Do we have any major pictures on the slides?
Major, we'll self-describe it, or we'll verbally describe it.
Let's see. There we go. That was a great catch.
Was it not? I mean, that's what.
That's all right.
Slides one. Word or something, and you know, what am I without?
We don't have pictures, we have, we'll describe what's.
Oh, yeah, and
Is it
videos,
part of
forget videos. I mean, they're really. Hey, by the way, Tim, I've been meaning to give you a hard time. I had to have a reality check after my little minute video. Where you introduced verbally. I wasn't mentally, I've been hiding it. You said, you mentioned me as a gray haired.
Oh, yeah, sorry, man.
Like, ouch.
I'm sorry, man. That was one of those, I was like, oh.
Yeah, I'm denying that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I have
whenever.
You left,
when it
but I'm
did
waiting for the
having that
captions.
audio describing it there, I'm just like,
So again.
I pray
It's
that
like 6 months or
whoever
so.
I'm describing.
Yeah,
does
I'm
not
just
get
so
upset.
No, but it's, yeah, I just thought, you did a great job, man. You got a great radio voice. you know?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And,
In my video, the lighting could have been worse. I look like, I'm so self-critical anyway. I hate watching myself on any kind of video, but that's what
the big thing with a lot of those, videos is they require a lot of lighting than people.
yeah. Well, we were in the art hallway, you know, I get that,
Yeah.
that's echoey, and then white, it really made me feel, look tasty, you know?
Yeah.
And I only did it once. I think we had to redo stop at one point and then start, but
Oh, yeah.
besides that, once I would like to, after seeing myself, to do it a little bit better. More natural.
I know, it's,
It was good. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, no, honestly, the way when I saw them when they came out.
I was just jealous.
So well.
I just jealous other people looked really good. And I just think,
We'll see now, you know, next time. You gotta choose a better location.
well, I tried, but it was there was nothing behind. Everything else has stuff on the walls.
Mhm.
They didn't want that. They didn't want it to be about us. They wanted it to be about, you know, the message.
But it's a lot easier to take in a message. The person delivering it looks good and sounds good.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how you feel. As long as you look marvelous.
Exactly. You look spectacular.
Yeah, and then you have some national champions that were in that meeting that leads some national calls. Yeah. We'll be back. Thank you. She was explaining in our last one that he wasn't verbally describing what was on the screen. And so, people who can't see the screen and wasn't even receiving the information he was saying, because it didn't make sense, because he was referring to it, but not talking about it, or what it was.
Guy in my session did a really good job of describing everything.
Oh,
He like
that's awesome.
prioritized it first on every.
I'm excited to hear about yours.
Yeah.
It's nice to see.
She went to, building, outreach, what was it?
Yeah, communication outreach through public libraries.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's a
In rural communities.
round
Rural,
table,
yeah.
so everyone was kind of participating, so there's some really interesting discussions.
I think my cool teammates were there.
Yeah.
Were they? Guy,
One I haven't met.
big guy?
He had a beat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I mean.
Man,
Robbie?
that's a skull cap.
Did he have Robbie? So he's my immediate supervisor. So. He's cool. He's a good soul, you know, just really good soul.
Yeah, they both spoke up
Good.
during their own.
Yeah, right on. Thought I saw Ty here a couple of minutes ago. I better sit down. So big nuts. Do we pass the mic? What do we,
Yeah.
or can they hear us? Just, they can probably hear us.
No.
No? No? Yeah, they can hear everything we just said. Yeah, oh, I know. Oh, yeah, but I meant it's coming through that, sitting there or we don't.
Here, and Tim probably,
Okay.
you and me, use this one and I'll run.
I've never had one.
I like them.
I might as much as that's. Yeah. But I'll try to just kind of.
Oh, yeah, that's why.
It's good to know.
Hi, everyone. We'll get started in about a minute.
Yeah. It doesn't matter.
The presentation, the presenters that they're talking. Yep. Please. Thank you. Hi, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Sadie Martinez. I'm the Access and Functional Needs Coordinator for the State of Colorado's Office of Emergency Management. If you were to meet me in a crowded area and you could see, I would describe myself as a shorter statured Latina, long black hair and dark eyes. And I am wearing a red shirt with a black sweater, and I use the pronouns she, her, hers. I am here today with a group of wonderful, talented people to be able to talk about creating resource disaster response teams with the whole community. I do have my team members here, Hannah Hoffman and Tim Mann, who are whole community inclusion planning specialists. They'll self-describe themselves when they're going to be speaking up. I also have my partners that we plan with from Atlantis Center for Independent Living, Kurt Garrett, and the State Independent Living Council. My one point of contact there, Evan.
What's that?
How do I say your last name?
Shockley.
Shockley. Sorry. Thank you. So Evan Shockley. All righty. All right. What we are wanting to have you walk away with today is that we want to look at how rural community members can prepare for disaster resource disruptions. So we're going to look at the disaster resource disruption versus only the disaster. So we're going to introduce you to a memory tool that will help you better prepare for the resources disrupted tied to any disaster that may happen in your community. Disruptions in ways that support the independence and leaves no one left behind. So we're going to look at it in a social model versus a medical model in emergency management, so that we don't get stuck in skilled nursing facilities, so that we start identifying what the actual resource need is before the bad day happens. And when the bad day happens, you identify what that resource is, and you're helping emergency management also before the bad day happens to know what resources they're going to need to prepare for, to have available when the bad day happens. And then after the bad day happens, we want to make sure that you're able to go back to living independently. Our agenda today is going to be preparing for the disaster-related resource disruptions, and Hannah is going to lead us in that conversation. And then we're going to go and talk about conducting disaster preparedness and setting up rural disaster response teams in your community, and who those people would be in your communities. We were just in a previous session, and they were talking about response teams that were set up in centers for independent living. I thought that was such an innovative concept when we're working when the bad day happens. And then we're also going to have a conversation of conducting disaster preparedness settings in disaster response teams. Sorry, that's where I was earlier. I have to look at my notes to make sure I stay on track. All righty. And with that, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to hand this over to Hannah, and she's going to take this is interactive, so I will be running the mic also as we all participate together. We're all about a plan with approach versus a plan for, because we don't know what we don't know, and we can only learn from those with lived experience. We can't just pretend we know what that is. So that's why we're going to have you participate with us. So off to you, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Hoffman. I'm with the Colorado Office of Emergency Management as part of the Access and Functional Needs team. I use she, her pronouns. I am not wanting to say middle-aged, like getting into the middle-aged zone of my life. Person, short-ish, dark hair and fair skin. And today I'm wearing black pants and a gray blazer and a white t-shirt. So today I'm going to spend the next 40-ish, 30-ish minutes talking to you about disaster preparedness and planning for local resource disruptions. So the title of this workshop is Creating Resource Disaster Response Teams with the Whole Community. And an essential component of that is developing community members who can meet their own resource needs and their community's resource needs during a disaster. Or what we'd call a zero responder, which I will come back to in a few minutes. And a critical step in that actually needs to happen before the bad day happens, which is disaster preparedness. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on here for the next little while. What I'm going to share with you is actually based on a workshop called How to Prepare for Everything. It's actually based on a book by Aaron Titus, and we've turned it into a 4-hour workshop. I'm trying to condense that down today into 40 minutes, so bear with me as we kind of speed through this, but it's to really give you an idea of what is in that workshop. And if you're interested in taking the full workshop, I will share how to do that at the end of my presentation. So who here has some idea of what disaster preparedness is? All right. Yeah, so we're going to talk about personal disaster preparedness today, which is really about preparing for your essential resource needs that may be disrupted during a disaster. And for those of you who are not familiar with this concept, you might have heard suggestions like build a 72-hour emergency supply kit or a 3-day kit to keep at home, or sign up for emergency alerts, or plan an evacuation route out of your home in the case of a fire, or out of your neighborhood in case of a disaster. So those are examples of disaster preparedness. I like to think of it as preparing to minimize the disruption that a disaster could cause to my life. And another way you can think of it is becoming a zero responder. So if you're not familiar with that term, a zero responder is basically just a member of the community, a member of the public who is there on the scene when a disaster or an emergency happens. Maybe they just happened to be there when the disaster struck. And these are not trained professionals. These are not emergency responders or first responders, which is why they're called zero responders. They're there before the first responders can arrive, and they're there to help themselves and their community, their neighbors, their personal support network deal with the disaster until help can arrive. So really part of disaster preparedness is really becoming a zero responder in your community. And this is important because studies have found that after large disasters, 80 to 90% of the life-saving support that happens actually comes from neighbors first. And so it's really important to become a zero responder because you might be able to help your community before the first responders can arrive. So before we get into the actual heart of what we're going to talk about today, I also want to share a term with you called CMIST, and it's an acronym. It's on the slide here. The slide says communication, maintaining health, independence, support services and safety, and transportation. And that is what CMIST stands for. I will refer back to that many times today. If you were here last year at the conference, I believe that Sadie and Tim did a presentation on CMIST. So if any of you were able to come to that, you might be familiar with the term. But these are 5 essential resources that not only save lives during disasters, but actually help preserve pre-disaster levels of independence and self-determination through the disaster. So if you're wondering why these 5, these were actually these came out of an after action report from Hurricane Katrina, which had definitely disproportionately impacted people with disabilities and older adults. So in that after action review, they found these 5 essential resources were critical in saving life and protecting independence. So what do these really mean? So communication could really mean any resource that you rely on for communication, like your cell phone or your computer, the internet, posted signs like we're kind of using at this conference to try to find the rooms, assistive technology. It's really anything that you use to communicate on a day-to-day basis. Maintaining health. What we mean there are resources that you rely on a day-to-day basis, like food and water and heating and cooling and power, prescriptions, again, maybe assistive technology. It's really anything that's helping you maintain your health. We're not talking about acute medical care or emergency care. So these are daily living resources. And then independence, what we mean by that is anything that supports your independent functioning, which again could differ from person to person. Like some people say that money is an independence resource because without access to their money, they can't really independently function. Or legal documents is another example. Service animals, the list goes on. For me, I wear contacts. So if I don't have my contacts in, I'm definitely not able to function independently. And then support services, I think of this as who are you relying on for support and who is relying on you. This could be if you have children or you have aging parents or anyone else that you're providing kind of a caregiving type of service to, anyone in your personal support network, your pets, your animals, they rely on veterinary services. So the list goes on again in there. And then transportation, you might think of cars and public transportation, but also fuel and the infrastructure in your communities like roads and bridges. So if you're still kind of like, what, I don't really get this CMIST thing, let me show you how this works. If a disaster happened right now at this conference, what resources of yours would you need in order to function and in order to survive and in order to experience as little disruption to your life as possible?
This is Becky from Wyoming. I keep my med boxes in my backpack.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, and for those of you kind of percolating on that, I would say that question's kind of broad, right? Like that's hard to, it's overwhelming in a sense. And that's the value of having this CMIST memory tool because it helps you start to narrow down essential resources. So if you're like, gosh, I don't know, that list could be huge, I would say, okay, what are your communication needs that you have right now? Like if the power went out in the building right now, how long would your cell phone battery last until you're not able to use it anymore? I see a comment back.
Oh, I just, you made me think when you talked about service support and safety, about being far from my kids who are dependent on me, and then my stepson who has some medical needs that are dependent on me. So I definitely need my phone to hopefully be working so I could communicate, and then some kind of way to get back home to Alaska as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. That's such a great example of that support service. Thank you so much. Yeah, and so yeah, if a disaster happened here today, not only would potentially your communication resource be disrupted, but also maybe your transportation, many other things. So that's the value of CMIST is it helps us think more specifically about the resource needs we might have that could get disrupted. And my additional question to add on to that is if your resources were disrupted. So again, like let's say you lost your communication resource today. How long until you're having to rely on someone else to help you with that resource need? And how long is that going to last? And I would say like if a power outage happened here today, maybe you're not relying on someone else for too long. But what about the folks who have been impacted by the hurricanes happening right now? Their resources have been disrupted, and how long are they going to be relying on others to support them until they get those resources sustained or regained?
Hi, this is Ty from Colorado. I know many of you. I think that's a good question to ask. You know, I bought enough meds for this conference, but I have no transportation here. I have very little independence. You know, I'm reliant on the people that kind of brought me out here and the fast food, which isn't the best for me. So I just out of curiosity, do you ever do travel CMIS plans, and things that help people think about what they need for when they're going on trips and then like get stuck in a hurricane or so?
Yes, and actually it's almost like I planted you in the audience. Um, because CMIST is not just an emergency or a disaster preparedness tool. You can use it for planning what you need to bring on a trip. I go camping, and so I use CMIST to help me think about what I need if I'm out in the wild all by myself, like what are my communication needs and so on and so forth. So it's a great tool to help you start thinking more specifically about what you might need. So I think that pointed out the value of it on a personal level, but going back to our emergency management perspective at like an organization level, if you're here representing an organization, or the emergency manager level for communities, the value is that traditionally the focus of emergency managers falls more on demographics, like they put a label on a certain type of person and then they try to figure out what the needs of that certain type of group might be. And the problem with this is not only does that exclude people, let me say that again. The problem is not only does it exclude people for various reasons, but it also doesn't identify the actual resources those folks need. Like, how many of you have been labeled as something, and then someone makes an assumption about what you need that is totally off the mark? And so, again, the value of CMIST is it's not about your label, it's not about how you identify, it's just about your resource needs. And so it creates this kind of universal design and shared language that emergency managers can use with community that actually identifies the resources that are needed and includes the community in that plan. Okay. So now we're actually going to get into the workshop.
Hannah, will you hold for one moment? This is Sadie.
Sure.
For those of you who will benefit, what is on the screen is a QR code, and it's in the front of the room towards the right, your right side. And it has a QR code for those of you who want to use your assisted devices. You could also visit bit.ly/ all uppercase letters COAFNF and then lowercase LYER to be able to look at what we're referencing to with this CMIST resource need.
This is Mark Springfield from Disability Advocacy Center. And this past week, in response to a disaster in Asheville, we were using code words between communities. So the community know when we respond to them what the code word, and have two-way radio. And then sometimes we did light signals as well. I gave it different colors lights for different messages.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you're reminding me of some of the stories I've been hearing about what's happening in North Carolina in the rural communities where they lost access to a lot of their communication, and they were relying on like word of mouth and signs that people were posting on fences, and neighbors were handwriting information to pass along to other neighbors. So I think what you're saying will help us prepare for what we're about to get into, which is some creative solutioning for when your resources are disrupted. And come to you in a minute when the mic is available. But oh, okay. Yeah. So we'll just keep moving and then I'll come back in a minute. Oh.
A few things that we do in Washington. I'm sorry, I'm Jim and I'm from Washington. Sorry, I forgot to start that way. I'm one of the managers, one of the coordinators, and I'm included in the emergency management plan and committee for Washington. So, okay, one of the things that we do in Washington is that we offer gestural training to some of our emergency responders. And it's one of the tools that we ask them to learn. It's not like trying to learn a whole new language. They don't have to learn American Sign Language. They don't have to learn Spanish or another spoken language, but just natural gestures learning how to gesture to show, I need to bring you someplace else. You need to evacuate. I'm going to get you someplace else. So learning how to communicate with people, just using your body and natural gestures, using props if you need to, pointing to things, just thinking outside of the box of how you normally would try to communicate. So we give a 2-hour workshop that teaches this sort of gestural method of communicating without, actually having to become fluent in a language that you don't know. So that's something else that you can think about adding to communication needs in case of a disaster. Before the first responders show up, your 0 responders could think about taking a training on using natural gestures, and that's something that you can do now. It's really very helpful, and it could help people survive, and it'll help your community members as well.
This is Sadie, and thank you for saying that, because that's really helping community partners and emergency management know what to do before a bad day happens as the communication resource. And when we talk about resources, they are people, place, or thing tied to CMIS. So back to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Sadie. Yeah, and thank you for that. Okay, let's get into this. So, like I mentioned earlier, this is normally a 4-hour workshop where we actually give paper handouts and worksheets and all of that. And so what is on the screen right now is a digital version of one of the worksheets we give out. So if I were to describe this screen, I would say it's a table that on the vertical axis has several types of regional disasters, pandemic, snowstorm, tornado, the list goes on, right? There could be a lot more on here that's not. Across the top horizontal axis are those CMIST resources, which could be disrupted due to a disaster. So what we're really looking at here is what resource disruptions could be caused by disaster. So an example here is a pandemic might disrupt your resources to maintain your health, your resources to maintain your independence, and your resources for support services and safety. I think of COVID, and it disrupted the TP supply at the grocery stores. I would count that as a maintaining health resource. It also made it difficult for many people to continue working, which maybe cost them their financial independence. And then I think of some of the older adults who were isolated during the pandemic and weren't able to be visited by their support network. And so that was a disruption. That's an important resource. So that's what the X's on the chart indicate, are disruptions to resources that occur. Now on the next slide, the format is the same. We have disasters listed on the vertical and the disruptions listed across the top. And on this slide, this is showing that smaller disasters, even personal level disasters, can still disrupt resources. So by definition, a disaster is overwhelming. If it's not overwhelming, it's not a disaster. And really, a disaster is considered to be a serious disruption to a person or a community that causes widespread damage and exceeds their ability to cope on their own. And so that's why we include personal level disasters here too, because like unemployment, for example, could cause major disruptions to someone's life that they're unable to cope with on their own. And so when you see all of these different types of disasters listed from large all the way down to personal, really when we think about disaster preparedness, it's really thinking about how to prepare for those resource disruptions that would be caused. And was there a comment in the back or a question? Okay, sounds good. So I want to pause here for just a quick minute and ask you to think about maybe a disaster you've experienced in your own life or that you've seen in your community or even on the news that's maybe not listed here. And then reflect on maybe some of the disruptions that caused and try to use that CMIST framework to think about it. And it's just more of a rhetorical question, but just to kind of bring the point home. All right. Now, the slide looks crazy, but I'll explain it. If we were doing this in person again, I mentioned we'd have a paper handout, a paper worksheet would have been the last one. And at this point, I would say, turn your paper 90 degrees so that all of those disasters that were listed on the vertical before, now they're on the top. And then those 5 CMIST resource disruptions, now they're listed on the side. And so that's what's shown on the screen here. It's the same information, it's just flipped 90 degrees. So all the X's still show the resources that are disrupted by these disasters. And you might notice now that there are a lot of disasters to try to prepare for. There's so many more that weren't even listed here. And this highlights a challenge in disaster preparedness, which is that it's hard for normal everyday people to prepare for disasters because there's so many different types of disasters that could happen. And on top of that, they're outside of our control. So that makes them kind of scary. And that creates something we refer to as FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or doomsday thinking. And that makes it hard to prepare because you don't want to think about it or you don't know where to start. So as an alternative, and what we're going to do here today is we suggest preparing for the disruptions, not for the disasters or the doomsday scenarios. So what I mean by that is if you look across this table, you'll notice that if you prepare for your communication resource needs, you're actually going to be prepared whether a snowstorm happens and disrupts your communication, whether a tornado disrupts your communication, whether high winds disrupt your communication, and so on and so forth. So you only had to prepare for one thing there, right? Communication. But by doing that, you were actually now prepared for a lot of different types of disasters and probably more that weren't even listed here. So by preparing for the disruptions, the resource disruptions, there's only 5 really, CMIST. It's a more approachable, more practical way of preparing that actually prepares you for the resource disruptions in a variety of settings that could occur in a variety of settings. And this can be kind of a hard concept for people to grasp. So here's an example. Instead of wondering how you prepare for a tornado, think about how you'd prepare if you lost your communication resources. So take the tornado out of the picture entirely. Just imagine you woke up tomorrow and you didn't have access to whatever communication resources you use. How would you prepare for that? And once you start thinking about how you'd prepare for a loss of your communication, then you're actually going to be prepared if a tornado takes out your communication, or a snowstorm, or a fire, or a flood. So the bottom line is it's the disruption that's the problem, not the disaster. The disaster just causes the disruption. And so our motto here is we prepare for disruptions, not disasters, because if you prepare for a few disruptions, you're actually prepared for many disasters. And we're going to put that into practice next. So this is where we spend most of our time in the actual workshop. So what's on the screen is another digital version of our normally printed handout. And I'll explain what is on here. So we have another table, and along the vertical, we have those resource disruptions I was just talking about. And you might be like, but where'd CMIST go? But these are really CMIST. These are just kind of broken out into more practical examples. So like loss of power and computer, or disruptions to your water, sewer, and sanitation, or disruptions to your shelter and property, or having to evacuate. And then across the top, you'll notice there's kind of like a timeline. So it starts at 0 hours, goes to 3 days, 2 weeks, and 1 month. And what this is saying, before I talk about that actually, there's a lot of blank space here. So the blank space is where normally in the live or in the real workshop, we would actually ask you to start thinking about solutions and strategies to deal with those disruptions, and you'd write them in the blank space. So like for power and computer, we'll look at that in more in a minute. But the reason the timeline comes into play is because the way you would plan to deal with a loss of power for like 0 to 3 days is going to be different than if your power is still out after 2 weeks. So your solutions are going to differ in each of those boxes. And again, remember, we're doing this in a disaster agnostic sense. So we're not saying like, what would you do if a tornado happened and you lost your power? We're just saying what would happen if you lost your power, period. And then you're prepared whether a tornado takes it out or anything else. And you might be thinking, yeah, but sometimes it does matter what the disaster is in my planning. And that's why we suggest that you come up with a few strategies and solutions in each box. So you have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. So if one of them is not relevant or possible in one situation, you still have a few other plans available. So we're going to do this all together. So participation is coming here in a minute. But this is just an example of doing a deeper dive of the power and computer. So on the screen, now we're only looking at power and computer, and there's a bullet point list that says light and cell phone and internet and computer and refrigerator, air conditioning. And these are just ideas to like start to get you brainstorming about what you would actually do if you lost your power and computer. Like you would, or power and computer, you might lose your light or you might lose your internet. And so what I'm going to ask you all to do here in a minute is start to give me your suggestions about what you would do. For example, if you lost your light, what would you do for the first 0 hours up to 3 days? For me, I have some flashlights in my house, but I'm probably not going to be using those after 3 days or 2 weeks. So I'm going to be coming up with other ideas for that at that point. And mine are going to be different than yours. Like you might not use flashlights. You might not even need light. So what I'm saying with these bullet points is these are just to get you brainstorming, but they might not always apply to everyone in this room. All right, so let's try it out all together. Normally in this workshop, I'd have you grouped in tables with each other and you'd actually be sharing ideas with each other. But since we're all in a big group here, we're going to just do it as a group. And just a few ground rules before we start. First of all, no one is right and no one is wrong because what works for you might not work for your neighbor. But we go by the philosophy that people are the best experts on their own needs. So if you hear an idea you like, we would normally suggest you write it down. And if you don't like it, then don't write it down. And the other ground rule is just that if you are an expert on a certain type of solution, because we know we have a lot of expertise, obviously share it, but also know that we're here to learn from each other. So we want to create space for everyone to be able to share in these workshops. We're not just building solutions, we're building relationships. And so normally this workshop is done in community to foster relationship building through that peer-to-peer sharing. And another kind of slogan for this workshop is we prepare better when we prepare together. So, time for your participation. We'll spend just a few minutes here. I'd love to hear from y'all. What ideas would you have if you lost your power and computer? And let's start with the first 0 hours to 3 days. What would some of your solutions or strategies be?
Candles, flashlights, generator, satellite phone.
Yes.
Batteries?
Thank you.
I would probably start notifying everyone as soon as possible while I had power on my cell phone that there's a chance that I would lose communication, so to be prepared.
I love that. Thank you.
I have backup batteries, so if my power goes out, I can do the same on my computer. And then I also have a laptop that if I need to go out into the community, I could. And then I have a couple like for like my fridge and my food. I have I guess this would be later, but some coolers that I can pack things in, kind of save things in cooler temperature.
Thank you. I thought I saw someone over there.
And I don't know if this counts, but I've had consumers like prior to emergencies, if they are power dependent, like if they have an LVAD machine, if they are oxygen dependent, like where they absolutely cannot go, then they register with the county. So that if there is power interruption, then they're going to be the priority.
I'm gonna chime in on this one real quick. That is a misconception and it's a false sense of hope. However, there will be a stronger communication with the person who has let them know that they're power dependent. Just in case, really check into that because with your power company.
With our EMS services, because we are such very, very small rural communities, they do have a list in some of our counties that they are able to prioritize and do that. So
That's good to know. That's a benefit for rural communities. Sorry, this is Sadie speaking.
Don't panic, because when you panic, you forget things.
Yes.
On your list to put it right there. Don't
Yes.
panic.
Yeah, and actually that brings up one of the many things I love about this workshop is that some of this stuff seems like kind of common sense, but we encourage people to write it down and then take away what they've written down from this workshop as their personal preparedness plan so they can reference it when the bad day, hopefully the bad day never happens, but if it does, when you're stressed out, you aren't able to necessarily be thinking clearly. So having a documented plan is definitely helpful. What about like a loss of heating or cooling? What would you do because the power is out for those first 0 hours to 3 days?
A barbecue?
Yes, yeah.
So I don't lose
actually,
food?
that's very true.
Funny enough, I have Vaseline and I keep all of my dryer lint in a bin because you can use that to create a fire starter and then keep old junk mail because then you have at least some source of heat.
Great recommendation. I'm learning so much new resources to put into my kit.
Just like many people in mountain estates, keep a sleeping bag in their vehicles. A good sleeping bag at home goes a long ways.
Yeah. I think there's one back here. Sadie's getting her steps in right now.
And this is Sadie, I don't mind.
Sleeping bag, propane heater, extra propane, and the hot packs that you use for your hands and feet.
Oh yeah, those hot packs. That's right.
I need one today.
Heat-wise, I agree with everything that's been said. And then we're in an apartment, so we have a tent. And so that we can all kind of be together in the tent because the apartment stays pretty warm. So if it's 0 to 3 days, we're thinking might last it out, especially the first day.
Hi, this is Tyler. For cooling, you might want to crack all the windows open. I mean, it seems real obvious, but people forget about that. Also, getting towels, wetting them, putting them on your back will cool your core down pretty quick.
Thank you. And then there's one more up front here.
This is Becky from Wyoming. I was thinking for cooling, because not many people have talked about that. I have a ton of ice packs in my freezer, and I know don't open and close the fridge and freezer, but getting those out as needed, they're pretty solid ice packs. Also the hospitals have generators for both heating and cooling. That's a good place to go.
Thank you. All right, so thank you everyone for your participation. Hopefully that was just a little glimpse into what we would normally be doing all together. These are some examples on the screen of what we've heard in the past for a loss of power in computers. So in the 0 to 3 hours, things like backup batteries, solar chargers, a hand crank radio to help with communication, flashlight, eating your perishable foods before they go bad, because if your refrigerator loses power, you have some food in there potentially, and then having extra blankets similar to the sleeping bag suggestion. 3 days to 2 weeks, so maybe looking at backup generators, eating your non-perishable foods, and then looking for heating and cooling shelters. If you aren't aware, some areas might have heating or cooling shelters. And then after 2 weeks, maybe looking for a temporary shelter somewhere else that does have power. So one more thing I wanted to add before we move on and kind of close this out is that different people prepare differently. So this workshop categorizes preparers into kind of 4 categories. So there's makers. So on the screen, there's a list that says maker, doer, buyer, and relationships. And then there's kind of a plus sign, plus your personal support system. So I'll explain all of that. The makers are exactly what it sounds. If you're the type of person who likes to DIY, do it yourself, this would probably be you. You might be the person who maybe wants to buy iodine tablets to make your own sanitized drinking water. And then we have doers. Similar to makers, they want to solve problems by staying busy, but maybe not necessarily by making things. So like this might be someone who really tries to educate themselves about preparedness through like training or education, reading, things like that that keep them busy. Then we have buyers. Hopefully this is somewhat self-explanatory. They solve their problems through buying things, which is fine. Like you might be buying things to put in your emergency supply kit and things like that. And then relationships really means that these folks rely on their personal support network to solve problems. And that actually relates to the other piece that we have here, which is the importance of personal support systems in preparedness. Because there might be ideas you heard here in the room today that you're like, I really like that idea, but I don't know if I could do that. And that's when you might still want to note that as something you're interested in and start thinking about who in your community or your personal support system could maybe help you out with some of that. And that can range from friends to families to caregivers, your neighbors, local teachers, counselors, librarians, faith-based organization leaders, social groups, like anyone in your community that you might have a connection to or want to build a connection with. And obviously our Centers for Independent Living. So we also don't want to just think about what they can do for us. We want to think about who in our life might need something from us if a bad day happens and be thinking about what you might be able to help them with as well. So I can kind of keep this quick. We're gonna do one more round of this. This time we were gonna look at transportation, but I think just for sake of time, I'm gonna skip over this. But just to kind of give you a explanation, normally in the 4-hour workshop, we would actually try to work through almost every category of resource disruption so that by the end of it, you are walking away with a documented plan that's personal to you to help you with your preparedness. But to close this out so we can turn it over to the rest of our great panel here, I would just say hopefully the bad day never happens, but if it does, you'll be more prepared. If you're thinking about your CMIST resource needs and you have your preparedness plan, and again, remember at the beginning, CMIST not only helps save life, but also protects independence throughout and after the disaster. And again, don't forget about the importance of your personal support network in that. Neighbor helping neighbor is so critical during disasters, especially in rural communities. And so what this might look like for you as a takeaway today is start thinking about what your own CMIST resource needs are and share those with your personal support network. Let them know and maybe ask them to think about it for themselves as well. And maybe consider going to the full How to Prepare for Everything workshop, which if you're interested, there is a QR code on the screen that goes to our Colorado Emergency Management Training Catalog. And there's also a bit.ly code that goes to the same training catalog. And there's instructions in that on how to request and attend our trainings. Even though we're Colorado based, we try to offer all of our trainings virtually as well. So if you're ever in our neighborhood, you could join us for the training in person, but you're also welcome to join virtually. And with that, we are now going to move into, now that you know a little bit more about disaster preparedness and preparing for your resource disruptions, we're going to move into a discussion with our panel to learn about why disaster preparedness is important to support independent living in rural communities and how to get started in even a larger sense than what I just talked about with kind of personal preparedness. So, thank you all.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name's Tim Mann. I'm the other whole community inclusion planning specialist with the Colorado State Office of Emergency Management. I am a white man in his 30s with very long blonde hair, and I'm wearing amber or orange or sometimes yellow round glasses. I've been told it's a very John Lennon look. So if you remember what John Lennon looks like, you've basically got my look in your eyes. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this Q&A or questions and answers. And I'd actually like to start with you, Kurt. Why is individual disaster preparedness important, especially in rural communities?
Well, first of all, I'll introduce myself. My name is Kurt Garrett, and I am the Disaster Preparedness Coordinator for Atlantis Community. We're a Center for Independent Living in Denver. We serve 7 counties in surrounding Denver, including the actual city and county of Denver. Descriptions, I'll just start at the top, and I'm in denial. Apparently, my hair is graying. My forehead is also growing, so just those things you got to accept in life. I identify as a disabled white man. I'm wearing a blue sport coat with a white shirt that's kind of checkered and gray pants. Did I forget anything? I wish I could look like John Lennon. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so why? A couple reasons. And people live in rural areas already know this. The people that come to rescue me or help me might be 50 miles away, right? And to think that they're going to come right away, it's not going to happen. They might be there in, if they have a really fast vehicle in a couple hours and the conditions are right, or it could be 2 weeks, right? The people in North Carolina right now know it's probably a lot longer than that, so knowing that, there's statistics, Census Bureau came out, over half of people with disabilities that are involved in a disaster never go home. So that lack of planning, personal planning as well as community planning. The other big thing, the reason I do what I do, previous to working for Atlantis, I worked for Denver Parks and Recreation running youth programs, and never knew anything, disaster preparedness besides fire drills, and tornado maybe, nothing. But I was also on the Mayor's Commission for People with Disabilities, and Denver Office of Emergency Management sent me to a FEMA conference in 2011. It was Get Real 2, I think is what it was called. But it was communities from all over the United States reacting to Katrina, the Hurricane Katrina, and all the terrible things that, people's lives were lost, in New Orleans. And the one story that changed what I wanted to do the rest of my life was the head of the Office of FEMA's Office of Disability Integration and Coordination. She told the story of sitting on a cell phone with a woman in New Orleans that had no plan. She had no way to get out of her home. She listened to that woman drown on her cell phone. If you don't know why you go to work every day, that's why I go to work every day. We can't let these things keep continuing happening. And a lot of that responsibility is on us as individuals with disabilities to have our own plan, to not think that somebody's going to come and save me. It's why I do what I do. And we need to pass that on to everybody else. My personal preparedness workshop that I run, I really got everybody's attention when I told that story. The people really kept coming every month because of that.
That's really great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kurt. Now, you mentioned your preparedness workshop. That actually leads perfectly into the next question. What are some ways that you can conduct or actually help train the individuals or community members on preparedness or having that outreach?
Sure. What we do at Atlantis, I have an in-person once a month workshop. And we use the CMS tool. It's easy, we cover a different part of that each month. So like communications, we talk about how do I get warnings, all the things that I need to do, what if I do go someplace, do I have other communication needs? My deaf, do I have to use a communication device, those types of things. And then what if I can't communicate with my family and friends? Do I have a plan related to that? So we cover each of the, those an hour a month. You can also do virtual. I personally am not as good at virtual as I am in person, but I try to do hybrid, and that's really hard, to do between the room and who's online, unless you have a couple people facilitating. But those are the ways. I'm also now connecting our youth transition program has contacts with schools. So doing presentations at schools. ARC, has different branches at different counties. So connecting with as many groups as possible that I can. I'm going to go out to a county in eastern Colorado that's east of Denver. And the last thing is I also, and we'll talk about how this happens, but starting in the next couple months, we will include disaster preparedness on consumers' goals, which I think is really huge. So our new consumers that come in, starting probably the end of this month, that will be an option.
That's fantastic to hear. Thank you so much for that. Now, again, you're doing great at leading right into these next questions, because you mentioned how you'll have presentations at schools. So my next question is for both you and Sadie. What are some ways that you can conduct systems advocacy and outreach?
Me first. The big thing is relationship building. I can't sit at the Atlantis office and not reach out, and it takes a lot of work. You wouldn't believe how many committees I'm on, but Zoom really enables us to do a lot of these committees to virtually, but developing relationships with planners and trusting relationships. I think that trust piece is huge. I really found probably the most rewarding piece of my job now is I go to a lot of these meetings, and it's no longer, oh, we're planning for those people over there, because I'm a person with a disability at the table. It is we instead of they, which is huge, very, very empowering. And most folks want to do the right thing. If you don't know, you don't know. And just to be in a meeting where I say one sentence might make a difference, in something. So, but it's reaching out, going to the counties you serve. Just remember that planning's done at the local level. So city, county, and then the state and FEMA support that. So all the planning, you need to connect with those planners in your communities.
Thank you so much, Sadie.
This is Sadie. That was what I was going to say. It's locally driven, right? Locally planned, being able to look at what your local CMIST resource needs are and gaps, and you being at those meetings, speaking up about what those actual resources are going to help emergency managers who resource coordinate people, place, or thing resources, and then be able to ask for that help. And when they surge in their local capacity, they ask the state for their help. And then if the state doesn't have that resource, the governor then will declare, and this is why it takes so long for FEMA to arrive, because the governor needs to make that decision to ask for FEMA or the federal help, which is basically a lot of funding and bringing in people, place, and thing resources. So I always think of it, if we're planning for FEMA to arrive, it's too late. Well, our plan is just gonna break. So we really want to plan like nobody's coming, like you had mentioned earlier, Kurt, about that. Now, what places that you could attend is meeting emergency management where they're at, is at some of their local emergency preparedness committees, or LEPC meetings. They're multi-agency coordination meetings, MAC meetings, MAC. There's some other other meetings like the Healthcare Coalition meetings that you could be part of as well to help emergency management and the emergency support function partners learn what they don't know because they don't have lived experience. And it only makes us better because, again, in emergency management, they don't speak the same language as we do in human services, in advocacy, as a person with lived experience, or in public health. They speak resources. So if you say, and I'll give you an example, in 2019, we had a major blizzard in Colorado, shut down almost all of our counties. And I was activated in the State Emergency Operations Center and was told, hey, Sadie, we have 500 people with AFN. First off, I was like, what? What does that mean? And then they were like, Sadie, can you start getting resources? And I said, yes, as soon as I find out, are they communication resource needs, maintaining health resource needs, independence resource needs? Is it support services or safety resources or transportation needs? And they're like, aha moment. It was for a group of refugees who have never been through a blizzard before, just needed the information and the language they best understood. So it was a communication resource. I didn't have to find that. I just have to help them recognize that that was the resource gap for them to be able to get to those community members to help them live through this event.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that addition, Sadie. Now, both of you had mentioned about how we need to prepare at that local level, because if we're waiting on state or federal resources to get to us, it can be too late a lot of the time, if not every time. So, Sadie, how would we get started in building a local disaster preparedness team in our rural communities? That way we can actually respond locally.
So this is Sadie. What I recommend is you being part of those conversations. And then earlier we were hearing in an earlier presentation about building your own capacity. So maybe bringing together your partners that serve community on a regular basis in the CMIST areas so that you could start building these response teams that could stand up, and you do this before the bad day happens. So when the bad day happens, everybody knows what they're going to be doing when that bad day happens. So then people can be more resilient and recover quicker and faster and be able to go back home instead of never being able to return back home. Take trainings, try to better understand the language of emergency management as well, and vice versa, right? It can't be just one way of emergency management coming to you. You can also go to them, and we keep meeting each other and better identifying where we could work together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. My next question is actually going to be for Evan, as our Colorado representative for the State Independent Living Council. What are some strategies that you've used and you've seen work in order to sustain this effort in disaster preparedness?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And I'll just give a visual description. This is Evan. I am a white male in his 30s. Today, I am wearing actually the new April shirt, which is about a light tan, and it's got a Chicago skyline across it. And I am wearing a little beanie hat today as well, and cargo shorts. And one of the major things that comes from me, coming from the Statewide Independent Living Council, and one of our main objectives and duties is developing the state plan for independent living. And that is where, in my role as the chairperson and leading the effort this recent year and a half with developing the new state plan for independent living, was finding a way to make sure that that collaboration and all of those things that have been mentioned, making sure that we're planning ahead of time and being more proactive than reactive. And by getting it in the state plan for independent living has been one of the biggest things to me, as one of the best strategies that you can make sure that the Centers for Independent Living, like Kurt is up here, is actually included, that they possibly receive some Part B dollars and some real funding in order to do this, because we all know, working at Centers for Independent Living and being involved in creating a state plan for independent living, if you're in a SILC, is that the funding is thin as it is, and emergency management isn't one of the 5 core services. but it is very important. And as you can tell, I hope that the CMIST, it really does align with the 5 core services that the Centers for Independent Living focus on and provide direct services for, and that the Statewide Independent Living Council assists with developing that state plan for independent living. So from a council side, some of the best strategies that we can do as a statewide independent living council is to try and partner with our emergency management teams and making sure that their voice is heard during the spill development and that it goes out to the consumers while you're outreaching to develop the state plan.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Evan. Now, this question is actually going to be for all 3 of you. So we're going to just work back down towards Kurt, starting with Evan. What is the importance of emergency planning and preparedness in a state plan? I know we've talked a little bit about that already, but I'd like to hear some more specific points from each of you about why this is so important.
You know, this one's a little bit more personal to me, and coming into chair position at the Statewide Independent Living Council, and then starting to learn about all the networks that were developed there and trying to fill in that seat very well, and starting to actually get to know Sadie a little bit better, and really starting to realize that's just the true alignment that happens and the value that comes with being able to get our Centers for Independent Living support in being able to provide these services to consumers, especially coming right out of a public health emergency and trying to be, like I'd mentioned once before, just trying to be a little bit more proactive than reactive when it comes to situations like this.
Earlier, when we were talking, this is Sadie, when we were talking, you also reminded me about when Centers for Independent Living are at the planning table, they're able to do work before the bad day happens, such as getting memorandums of understanding and memorandums of agreements in place with emergency management, so that when they respond and the bad day happens, they're actually able to be eligible for reimbursement for the services and supports that they provide when that bad day happens. And so thinking about that as you keep working with your emergency management and do stuff way before the bad day happens. I think about also how using this framework of CMIST and planning for your resource disruption really supports the social model. It moves us beyond the medical model where somebody is telling you that you need these resources. You are now able to be part of the plan of saying, I need these resources. I get to self-determine what I need in this disaster. You in the medical model and emergency management, an older framework, not telling me that you need to go to a skilled nursing facility. So it really helps us move from that.
And for me, it's a little personal too. I got to keep my job. So I came on with Atlantis right in the middle of COVID, June of 2020, and I was paid through COVID CARES funds. Actually, there were several. I mean, at the time, I think I was paid out of 7 different grants, and I'm down to 2 right now. But because our state plan includes disaster preparedness, I can be, you know, I feel like now I'm an equal to all my other staff, you know, because I just think it's important. I think it's another great tool that supports the concept of independent living, that we're teaching you. We want you to be independent. We don't want you dependent on us. We don't want you to be dependent on some firefighter that's 50 miles away, you know, that it's me. I got to be responsible for me. So I just enjoy that. And that is what it's also, that the change of the funds, I can now be part of setting goals and do all that, where I couldn't really do that before. So I'm excited.
That's really great. Thank you so much, all 3 of you, for those incredible answers. For Evan, I have just one last question, where you've talked about the importance of disaster preparedness and the importance of that personal responsibility. But when it comes to actually getting it into the statewide plan for independent living, what are some of the best practices of getting disaster preparedness in there?
Well, thanks for the question, Tim. This is Evan. I think that for me initially was gaining buy-in of our Center for Independent Living directors, and also having a very, like to define it, and this is coming from my direct supervisor right now, a more of a hands-out approach than a hands-up approach when we're coming into something like this. Me being a consumer once at a Center for Independent Living and have that lived experience and having an invisible disability and having all kinds of my trials and tribulations, you know, as a person with a disability, you really gain a lot of support from people who are doing it. So living by example is also another thing, because I know that we focus on so many other things, people with disabilities, and emergency management might not be the top of our list, but it is very important. And I think that living by example and having your own plans, as well as having that hands-out approach when collaborating and making sure that we have our emergency managers at the table, and all of these people were involved in the spill development and in the committee, and making sure that we are also providing informed choice on those types of things by providing trainings and allowing people to connect to Sadie if they had questions during the development of the state plan for independent living, and just having a very high reliance on that like three-legged stool that's always mentioned, and utilizing your SIL network, utilizing your statewide independent living council, and utilizing your designated state entity and all of the other partnerships that happen around your state to make sure that there is a collaborative effort, that everyone is on the same page and understands what we're trying to complete with this, and just be very intentional when you're getting together, and make sure that everyone has a uniform voice, and that the consumers out of all of it through the surveys that go out in the very beginning to develop the goals are also informed and educated about emergency management.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for this great Q&A and discussion. Sadie, feel free to take us away.
Awesome. This is Sadie. Before I switch the slides, for those of you who benefit from using your assistive technology to help get the information that's on the screen, there is a QR code that is in the front of the room on your right side, and more towards your right side of the room. There is also a website that you could go to, bit.ly/ all uppercase COAFNT lowercase RAINING uppercase C lowercase ATALOG. Again, that is bit.ly/ COAFN training catalog. And you could see all of our different variety of trainings that we're trying to help everybody better learn how-tos tied to the must-dos of meeting ADA, meeting Section 504 of the Rehab Act. That goes into all the other subsections of 504, such as Section 508 of the Rehab Act, as well as any other protected classes like our Older Americans Act as well, and how we're able to keep planning with and meeting community and meeting the needs of the community. And so now we're going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to start closing us out. So in summary, what we really want to talk about today is that prepare for your CMIS resource disruptions, not just the disaster. It helps you not get so overwhelmed. And especially it also helps those who do not have the economic means of being able to have a 72-hour kit. The economic means to be able to, that don't have the trust in government to say, hey, I don't think you're gonna, I don't trust you anyway. But it still doesn't leave people behind. It helps when there's not enough capacity, and it helps when people are isolated geographically, which is rural, right? Culturally, which is different cultures that just are excluded because at the shelter, they're only going to serve foods that does not align with my culture. And then there's also socially, which is our community members. When a community is very faith-based oriented and they leave out and exclude our LGBTQ plus, and there's more letters now, but inclusion of those who do not traditionally identify as male or female as well. And so we want to make sure that there's inclusion in that. When people are just visiting or passing through, they're not left behind. People who are living nomadic lifestyles, those who are doing work seasonally and are farm workers, And then also those who are experiencing homelessness as well and finally, racism. When racism or any other isms are in the way of not being able to get access to my CMIS resources. If I prepare like nobody's coming, I still will have my CMIS resources and be able to find who can help me because I have my personal support network helping me before that zero responder, right? It's the zero responder where I'm not having to wait for the first responder to help me through this. We want to make sure that you involve community and partners in preparedness and outreach. And we said it's both ways, right? It's both of us going to emergency management and emergency management coming to us as well. And that starts with those relationships that everybody has talked about up here. And that is how we became who we are. This team right here, our partners, advises us as access and functional needs in Office of Emergency Management. They help guide us to ensure nobody is left behind. And then our statewide Independent Living Council and the State Plan for Independent Living. And I got to give kudos to Peter Pike. He is our state level area agency ACL. Oh,
Designated state entity.
designated.
And I can't believe I just said those 3 words on one.
And he was a partner when I didn't know who was at the State Independent Living Council, and I worked hard. It actually, when we were able to get the emergency management into the State Plan for Independent Living, I got to tell you, I got chills because it took me a lot of relationship building to finally get it where you all understood what I was asking, as well as understood the benefit of how it's going to help people with disabilities remain independent as we keep going through this. And so the key points are identify your actual resource needs using CMIST. And we all know what that stands for. And just in case, I'm not going to assume. Communication resources. Go ahead, you guys could chant it with me as well. Maintaining health, independence, support services and safety, and transportation resources. And that is a memory tool. The reason why we use that is because when you go, oh, what does CMIS stand for? Let me go back to my notes. Until you remember it and you're working with your community, that is a memory tool that will help us save lives and keep us growing resiliently. Work with your state independent living council to consider how to get this into your state plan for independent living. And then finally, I want to leave you with this call to action. We're all a bunch of good people trying to do good things in emergency management. We just don't know what we don't know. But when a bad day happens, doesn't matter how you identify, your life matters. Whether you are documented or undocumented, whether you're a person with a disability or a person without a disability, whether you identify as a person with a disability or don't identify as a person with a disability. Our main goal is to save life when a bad day happens. And so we got to be able to learn what we don't know because we don't know from you as a person with lived experience. You're a subject matter expert and you'll help us grow. I also have a life quote and Hannah and Tim have reminded me that that's actually also our mission of our team is to not know and do nothing about it is forgivable. To know and do something about it is admirable, but to know and do nothing about it, it's unforgivable. And I hold myself accountable. And now that you know, I hope you hold yourself accountable as well to do something about this inclusion as you move forward. And so with that, for those of you who will benefit from what is on the slide, there is another QR code that will lead you to our website. It is in the same spot as I talked about earlier in front of the room to the right. There's the QR code and our website is bit.ly/ all uppercase DHSEMAFN. And you are welcome to also email us at CDPS_DHSEM_ afn@state.co.us. And with that, what questions do you have?
Thank you. I've been waiting for a while for question. When you had the side of things, and one of the things was divorce, it got me thinking of other things that might be related. And I was thinking about youth in the foster care system who have very little control over those, the CMIS. And I was just thinking one of the things you could do is maybe work with the foster care system to make sure that they have support and choices in communication, independent living, being connected to the support, whether if that's a positive or whatever that looks like. It might be friends that they are being taken away from, or family. The other thing I wanted to say that was connected to it, I was thinking of other examples because the foster care system is kind of a unique system. But in the mental health system, if you are being institutionalized against your will, you know, again, you don't have a lot of those controls. So what you can do to plan, and I talked to Kurt about this, is psychiatric advanced directives, making sure you have some things that are planned out ahead of time to make sure that you have the right people coming in to support you. You have the right sort of treatment and care that you want, and you don't get things forced on you. And then, Sadie said this towards the end, maybe working with people who are unhoused, because I had a situation of someone I worked with recently who was forcefully evicted and wasn't able to get all of their stuff. And I was just thinking, you know, if you're unable to grab your phone, what sort of communications are you going to have? If you can't grab your life supporting equipment, you won't have power. And thankfully, thanks to Kurt, he's a real champion in Colorado. Our when you go places where to help people who are homeless, they didn't support people who couldn't get support with activities of daily living, but Kurt and Sadie and other people really championed turning that around. So I just wanted to say, you know, those would be the three communities that I would hope that you guys work with and branch out to, because I think they could all use those supports, and a lot of those supports are beyond them at that time.
Hi, this is Eric from Wisconsin. You mentioned that there's a 4-hour workshop that you have that goes through this. Is that a workshop that you're willing to share to other people, have a train the trainer type deal? Because this is something that I would absolutely love to be able to implement in central and northern Wisconsin.
Thank you for the question. This is Hannah. So I don't know if it's possible to go back to the slide that has the QR code to the training catalog, but we definitely would love to have anyone here attend our trainings. We have a lot of different trainings, including that 4-hour workshop. So you can either go to the BITLY code and access the training catalog that way, or scan the QR code. And then through that, it will give you the instructions to find out what upcoming trainings are coming up, or even request to join. Again, we do all of our trainings virtually, well, hybrid. So you can join us in person if you're in Colorado, or hybrid, but yes, definitely. And then I would also just, again, give credit back to the original book, which is called How to Prepare for Everything. And you can look that up as well. It's by Aaron Titus. And that gives you all the instructions you need as well to learn how to do these workshops.
And this is Sadie. You'll also become a trainer after you take our training, because it's all about the force multiplication of that. We don't want to hold it. We also do not have limitations. The reason why we do things hybrid is so if you can't get to Colorado, you're still able to be with us in Colorado when you're able to attend virtually.
I was just going to say too, it's easy. You know, the first concept of planning for disruptions is what that's not really the framework, it's the mindset. If you start teaching that, and then you have the tool of CMIST, and let me tell you, I'm no rocket scientist, and I've developed mine, each month is based on, a lot of it is, I get with a group and we talk about it together. You know, you talk about maybe some things, but helping them learn themselves, just ask them questions. But if you can learn in a CMIST format, it's easy. It is so duplicatable that that's what I love about it.
Hi, this is Erica New, and I work with LIFO Center for Independent Living in southeastern Idaho. And we're very fortunate that our SPIL has put a lot of resources into doing an emergency management or emergency planning education, trying to get the information to our consumers who are already in the midst of those personal disasters or personal disruptions. And it's really hard to think outside of, you know, financial insecurity or home insecurity or anything like that. How, or do any of you have advice or how to kind of break that out into, I understand you're in the midst of a mess right now, but can we also step into planning for the future to mitigate that as well, if that makes sense?
This is Sadie. Hannah, I'll have you answer after me because it's still going back to that piece. But there is also a training that Office of Emergency Preparedness and Response normally has in our Colorado Department of Human Department, CDPHE, Department of Public Health and Environment. They do a psychological first aid that teaches anybody who is in a disaster to reduce your stress so you can increase your functioning. And regardless of who you are, again, just teaching those opportunities to be able to help somebody when a disaster strikes, because it looks different for everybody. Doesn't need to be an all hazard or an active threat. It could be the different disruptions like Ty shared or any of the other ones that we identified up on the screen. And then go ahead, Hannah.
This is Hannah. So I would just add on to what Sadie's saying, that probably in the heat of the disaster that they're in, that's where their focus will be. But you can still use CMIST as a tool to even guide them through that. Like, how can we find solutions to your maybe financial independence needs, or so on and so forth. And that's where thinking back to the 4 types of preparers, like makers, doers, buyers, and relationships, or even the personal support network, maybe they're stuck and they don't know how to solution that problem. And the thinking of those different ways of preparing helps you kind of think outside of the box, maybe. But the other beauty of CMIST is once they identify solutions to maybe something they're dealing with right now, in a way that is still creating a plan for the future, because if that happens again, they'll already now have a plan in place for some solutions to address those needs. So I know that's not a perfect answer, but hopefully that's helpful.
Hi, I'm Chuck Oakes. I'm Executive Director for Disability Partners in Silva and Asheville, North Carolina. Got a question. Do you have any resources that plan for extended periods? How to prepare for extended periods?
I'll try to answer that, but I might rely on some others here. Just that with the workshop today, we only really got to like that 0 to 3 hour time frame. But normally we would go into maybe even looking post 2 weeks. And that's again where this is a peer-to-peer in months. Yeah, this is a peer-to-peer sharing workshop. So it's designed to be conducted locally. Like I'm not an expert on what your local community might need for long-term recovery or solutions, but you should hopefully have some community members there when you're running this workshop that could share, hey, I know about this local resource or this local strategy or solution, and maybe your local emergency manager could even participate and give some solutions as well for what they've seen in the local community. But I will see if anyone else wants to add on to that answer as well.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, just keep encouraging you, your organization, and then your consumers to stay engaged and keep letting them know, because we all know accessible housing is going to be a huge issue, right? But as long as you're there in the room, they're way more likely to address that than if you're not. So we got to be in the room. That's, I think, the most important.
This is Sadie, and making sure that, okay, over here, and then I'm going to go over there. Just making sure that you are at their planning table when they're looking at resource capabilities in their communities, or being able to speak up to say, hey, include us. You can't do it without us.
Hi, this is Eric again. To help answer your question too, I just pulled this up. Wisconsin has the Council on Physical Disabilities, and they put together an emergency preparedness toolkit that comes with different checklists. And actually one feature on there that's really cool is it comes with a printable communication board. So this way, and actually at Stephen's point, we worked with our emergency response team to train them on the communication board and how to use it. And they keep it in the ambulances, police cars. So if they're interacting with someone who's nonverbal, they have a way to communicate their needs. If you would like, I could actually, and if anyone would like, I could send them like a copy of the link to this emergency toolkit. It's free for anybody to use. And actually a very valuable tool in helping people to be prepared. We got these after the derechos came in Wisconsin in 2018, and finding out that we were woefully unprepared, where we can handle a tornado, but like an inland hurricane was something brand new that we had experienced.
This is Sadie. Thank you for sharing that valuable resource. I'm going to need to look that up. Can you email me too? I have my email address right there.
Hi, this is Paige from Colorado. Following the 19th anniversary of the euthanasias at Memorial Hospital, my question is, how do we as people with disabilities survive triage, basically? And then how can medical and social service institutions learn to reform triage to value our lives?
So in emergency management, there's a standard crisis of care that happens, it goes into when all resources surge. And what happened in Colorado is the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition worked with the planners, that is normally in public health, and they came together. And I will tell you, during COVID, because we did stuff before the bad day happened, and the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition was part of building that crisis.
This is Tim. It's Crisis Standards of Care.
Yes, plan, crisis standards of care plan, then people with disability. And then my role is in the Office of Emergency Management. We right away looked at the personal protective equipment that was only going to go to first responders, if you recall that. It was leaving out those going to do in-home services and supports for those who were living independently in the community. So I right away spoke up with the governor's office, and we were able to also include those who were doing personal care attendant and going in and out of people's homes to help them remain independent. So those are some of the things that help with that, is being part of the planning process. And not just identifying the problem, but coming with a solution to that problem. That is the only way we're going to be able to do it. We can't keep admiring the problem and saying it's not happening. We have to be part of the solution of it as well. And I'll give you an example. When I was first at the Center for Independent Living, we had a core advisory group, and we had people who were part of it with lived experience saying, it is your job, emergency manager, to go and get me backup power. Backup power, wait a minute, I'm sorry, a backup oxygen. And it was like, it's my job. I don't even know what that is or where to get it. And so what I recommended is the person with lived experience say, what do you use on a regular basis? And then we could go and work with that organizations or those durable medical equipment providers, because that's really what that that resource is part of, to be able to have a memorandum of agreement or a memorandum of understanding. And so those are the different things that are happening, where we just don't say, hey, there's a problem, without a solution. We have to come together and be solution focused. All right, we have chance for one more question and then we will conclude.
It's kind of more, not particularly a question. We talked about a lot about, zero responders. And, you know, with the hurricanes going on now, we've found that zero responders are hugely important, early on. Maybe starting to develop some kind of, criteria or worksheet or, list of what a zero responder is, how they can possibly repair if they're interested in, or possibly prepare if they're interested in being a zero responder. You know, I mean, just a area that maybe we could work on.
And this is Sadie, and with that, they would be able to test and exercise what they are responsible for, so they could see where it breaks. Especially if the personal support network or zero responder is on vacation when the bad day happens. And so I like the idea of building a toolkit on that. With that, I want to sincerely thank you all for spending this session with us. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Excellent. Very is that I hopefully, yeah. 'Cause I think that's the most, we gotta be in the room and I'm sorry, you gotta be in the room all the time. Like I go to all these committees, like I said, I may say 2 words, but those 2 words, they know I'm there, you know, and we're, you know, and we're not left out.
That's right.
I've learned a lot.
All right.
There's something.
Right.
Let's exit that.
Also tomorrow, there's gonna be another, Vermont and Shaylin, they're with the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. 90% of what I know, I learned from them because they have a daily call, the Zoom call. They've had it every day since the beginning of COVID. And when I came on job, I'm the first one that ever had this job, but they really know all the subjects. Like the last question, the other thing is we need history. We need to know history, the mistakes, like all the stuff that is really not out there about COVID, I think, you know, especially with crisis care, you know, standards of care. So anyway, so thank you for asking. Yeah. Hey, talk to me later. I want to tell you something that, yeah.
You know what rural county in eastern Colorado, that's where.
Oh, Elbert.
Oh, I'm from Cape Breton.
Oh, okay. Well,
Kathleen.
so my dad was from the Panhandle of Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
Well, Boise City, Oklahoma. So I get the whole, you know, the rural thing. And
Yeah.
if you go to a lot of Colorado, you know, it's so interesting because we then have rural mountainous counties.
Another discussion, it's just bananas and how you treat the doctors. Like rural here in Kansas, like rural responders, it's like, you know, immediately when they're in the car wreck, you call flight for that, like you don't, you know.
Even right, yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, you know,
You don't, you're right. It's funny, so City of Lakewood has a CERT program. And Denver used to, and I learned a lot from there, but they had a group that does search and rescue. You have a pretty intense group. And they're the ones that said, you know, we get called in because we're closer and we're in another county than the sheriff's department is in another.